ละครับขอกราบสวัสดีนะครับท่านแขกผู้มีเกียรติผู้มีความมั่งคั่งทุกท่านเลยนะครับลูกค้าของ UOB Privilege Banking นะครับวันนี้ผมวิทย์สิทธิเวคินครับมีความยินดีเป็นอย่างยิ่งในการที่ได้มาเป็นพิธีกรผู้ดำเนินรายการของงานในวันนี้นะครับนั่นก็คือ Privilege Conversation 2026 Start of the Year Investment Outlook นั่นเองนะครับผมเชื่อผู้ที่มีความมั่งคั่งเช่นท่านนะครับต้นปีแต่ละปีก็จะตั้งคำถามบอกว่าความมั่งคั่งที่เรามีเราควรจะมีการบริหารอย่างไรสินทรัพย์แต่ละอย่างนี่มีแนวโน้มในอนาคตอย่างไรการเติบโตทางเศรษฐกิจในแต่ละภูมิภาคน่าจะเป็นอย่างไรกันบ้างนะครับแต่ละปีที่เราคุยกันก็คือว่ายากต่อการคาดเดาทุกๆปีนี้ก็เช่นเดียวกันนะครับมีความท้าทายมากมายมหาศาลแต่ว่ามีธีมหนึ่งครับที่ถูกพูดถึงกันนั่นก็คือ global divergence นั่นเองครับคำว่า divergence แปลเป็นภาษาไทยง่ายๆว่าไปคนละทิศคนละทางครับกล่าวคือบางพื้นที่ก็มีการเติบโตทางเศรษฐกิจดีบางพื้นที่ก็อาจจะไม่ดีเช่นเดียวกันนะครับสินทรัพย์ประเภทต่างๆก็เหมือนกันครับดังนั้นเพื่อเป็นการทำให้เราสามารถคว้าโอกาสท่ามกลางบรรยากาศที่เอาแน่เอานอนไม่ได้แบบนี้นะครับดังนั้นครับวันนี้ธีมของงานในปีนี้จึงมีชื่อนี้ครับ Navigating Global Divergences Opportunity Amid Shifts กล่าวคือการไขคว้าโอกาสนะครับท่ามกลางบรรยากาศที่เอาแน่เอานอนไม่ได้หรือมีความท้าทายแบบนี้นะครับทั้งนี้ก็เพื่อความมั่งคั่งของทุกท่านนั่นเองนะครับแต่ก่อนที่วันนี้นะครับช่วงเวลาประมาณสัก2 ชั่วโมงกว่าเราจะได้รับฟังอินพุตจากวิทยากรหลากหลายนะครับผู้มีความเชี่ยวชาญในแต่ละส่วนนั้นลำดับแรกนี้เลยนะครับอยากจะเชิญท่านผู้บริหารนะครับขึ้นมาแบ่งปันมุมมองในภาพใหญ่นะครับมาเปิดงานในวันนี้ครับดังนั้นในลำดับนี้ขอกราบเรียนเชิญนะครับท่านกรรมการผู้จัดการบุคคลธนกิจธนาคาร UOB ประเทศไทยขอเรียนเชิญและขอเสียงปรบมือดังๆต้อนรับคุณยุทธชัยเตยะราชกุลขอกราบเรียนเชิญ
ครับเรียนลูกค้าผู้ทรงเกียรติทุกท่านนะครับในนามของธนาคาร UOB ประเทศไทยผมขอบคุณทุกท่านเป็นอย่างสูงนะครับที่ให้เกียรติมาร่วมงาน UOB Privilege Conversation 2026 ในวันนี้ Start of Year Investment Outlook งานสัมมนาในครั้งนี้จัดขึ้นเพื่อตอกย้ำพันธกิจของธนาคาร UOB ในการเป็นพันธมิตรด้านการเงินที่เชื่อถือได้ซึ่งไม่เพียงแต่ในฐานะของธนาคารแต่ในฐานะของที่ปรึกษาด้านการเงินที่มองการไกลเข้าใจความต้องการของลูกค้าและพร้อมที่จะเติบโตเคียงข้างกับทุกท่านในทุกภาวะเศรษฐกิจในปี 2026 นี้เป็นอีกปีหนึ่งนะครับที่โลกแห่งการลงทุนต้องเผชิญกับความท้าทายความผันผวนและการเปลี่ยนแปลงอย่างมีนัยสำคัญทั้งในมิติของเศรษฐกิจมหภาคเทคโนโลยีและภูมิรัฐศาสตร์เราจึงเลือกหัวข้อ Navigating Global Divergence Opportunity Amid Shifts หรือมองโอกาสท่ามกลางความเปลี่ยนแปลงของโลกมาเป็นแนวทางหลักในการสนทนาในวันนี้เรายินดีเป็นอย่างยิ่งนะครับที่ได้เชิญผู้เชี่ยวชาญระดับนานาชาติจาก JPMorgan Asset Management Fidelity International UBS Asset Management และ UOB Asset Management มาร่วมแบ่งปันมุมมองและกลยุทธ์ที่จะช่วยให้ท่านวางแผนการลงทุนได้อย่างมั่นใจมีข้อมูลรอบด้านและสามารถปรับพอร์ตการลงทุนให้เข้ากับธีมเศรษฐกิจในโลกที่กำลังเปลี่ยนแปลงไปในปีนี้ท้ายที่สุดนี้ผมขอบพระคุณทุกท่านอีกครั้งที่ให้เกียรติมาร่วมงานในวันนี้และหวังว่าเนื้อหาและมุมมองที่นำมาเสนอท่านในวันนี้จะช่วยเติมเต็มมุมมองด้านการลงทุนและสนับสนุนการตัดสินใจการลงทุนของท่านในตลอดปีนี้ขอบคุณมากครับ
ครับขอกราบขอบคุณนะครับท่านกรรมการผู้จัดการบุคคลธนกิจของธนาคาร UOB ประเทศไทยคุณยุทธชัยเตยะรัชกุลนะครับอย่างที่ทางด้านคุณยุทธชัยได้เรียนไปแล้วนะครับว่าในปีนี้เองความไม่แน่นอนมีจากหลากหลายปัจจัยด้วยกันนะครับภูมิรัฐศาสตร์เองก็ดีในมิติการลงทุนเองก็ดีครับดังนั้นในวันนี้นะครับเราจะได้รับฟังจากวิทยากรหลายท่านด้วยกันนะครับแต่ก่อนหน้าที่เราจะเดินหน้านะครับไปวิเคราะห์ในส่วนต่างๆไม่จะเป็นตลาดสหรัฐเองก็ดีนะครับหุ้นในกลุ่มเอเชียเองก็ดีนะครับหุ้นที่เกี่ยวข้องกับเรื่องตัว AI การลงทุนใน AI เรื่องของการกระจายสินทรัพย์ในการลงทุนก็ดีนะครับเบื้องต้นเรามาดูภาพก่อนนะครับว่าเป็นการ set the stage นะครับว่าภาพรวมนะครับหรือว่า overview ของการลงทุนในปีนี้ในเชิงกลยุทธ์นั้นจะเป็นอย่างไรกันบ้างนะครับ Well, of course, we will be having approximately 2 hours from now in order to understand the perspective of the world right now in terms of investment. But before anything else, we need to set the stage to understand the comprehensive view upon the market and strategic investment perspective for this year 2026. And now it is my great pleasure and honor to invite upon the stage our first speaker for today. He is the head of deposit and wealth management of UOB Thailand, Mr. Abel Lim. Please give him a big warm welcome. ขอกราบเรียนเชิญคุณ Abel Lim นะครับวิทยากรท่านแรกของเราครับ
Sawadee Pee Mai. I just learned the word this morning. I hope I didn't butcher the word. You know, 25 was an eventful year. We had President Trump taking on the second term in office, unleashing Liberation Day. Markets reacted, and then it didn't. In fact, the year closed at a very firm footing. Many equities, many economies posted positive gains. China, during the same period, managed to score an exceptional 1.19 trillion trade surplus in that same period. Similarly, we also saw gold rising to levels not seen before. In 2025, the headlines was broadly in the space of artificial intelligence. Some of the big names out there, headlines, and we saw a huge growth in that space. However, if you had only invested based on headlines in a very narrow, very focused, concentrated manner, you would have missed out on quite a lot of things. In this chart here, it underlines the importance of diversification. It underlines why investors should adopt a global standpoint when it comes to investing. See, in investing, it's not about chasing pure returns. It's about positioning for outcomes, profiting from positive ones, and defending against negative ones. In this chart, it is very obvious that if investors had just purely focused on the United States, you have done well, no doubt, but you would have missed things a lot closer to home. Asia ex-Japan posted over 30% last year. China posted 31%. Japan posted 28%. These are very, very exciting numbers. And to further underscore this, we also see that investment-grade bonds posted a record 8.4% in 2025, highest since 2020, on the back of weaker US dollars, on the back of market volatility, and on the back of trade uncertainties. So investors should look beyond equities, beyond geographies. Investors would also be rewarded based on different asset classes. Now, how do we see 2026? How do we see 2026? It's not working. It's working now. On a global standpoint, we think that the economy will continue to grow at a relatively modest pace. IMF expects global growth to come in at 3.3% this year. We think that the global economy is likely to be well supported on the back of fiscal and monetary policies by the United States and China. In fact, the United States is likely to come in at 1.7%. We originally projected it to come in at just 1.5%. This is obviously on the back of the One Big Beautiful Act, with tax rebates, with regulations that's likely to further support the economy. Similarly, we think that China will continue to be very targeted in terms of how they are intending to stimulate the economy through rate cuts and also providing support in the current property woes that they are facing today. As such, we also think that inflation is likely to be very well controlled in 2026. This will give policymakers the policy space to cut rates later part of this year. In fact, there are just some signs of inflation found in groceries and maybe food in the United States. Whereas closer to this part of the world, inflation seems to be benign and probably in a very controllable fashion. We expect Federal Reserve to cut rates 2 times in the latter half of 26, bringing policy rate to 3.25%, at the upper band by the end of 26. Japan will be the outlier with a potential rate hike of 25% to bring policy rates to 1% in third quarter of 26. Now in UOB, we've identified 3 key trends which investors should pay attention to this year. A K-shaped economy. This K-shaped economy is not new. K-shaped economy came on the back of post-COVID, when a lot of letters were actually thrown out, a U-shaped recovery, a V-shaped recovery, an L-shaped recovery. But we think that the K-shaped recovery actually has the best representation of where the market is likely to trend and where we are today. I will come to this later as I have a number of slides on this. Secondly, we think that artificial intelligence, a key topic last year, will continue to dominate headlines. But in a broader sense, we recommend investors to think investing away from just all the mega names, all the big boys, but invest into the bottlenecks, where supply constriction happens in the chip space, in data centers, in energy grids. This broadening of the ecosystem is likely to play out in 26. Last but not least, we've already spoke about this, the importance of going global. Having a narrow set of investment, having a very narrow path to profitability is not ideal in anybody's portfolio. You need to broaden that scope, and we shall be touching about that slightly later. Now, the K-shaped economy. The upper arm, you will see that there will be continued strong investment capex into the artificial intelligence world. We think that this will continue to dominate headlines, and we will see significant amount of investments. In fact, it's been widely projected that AI investment in 26 will come in approximately at $600 billion. Secondly, we think that AI continues to be dominated by big firms. And this is important because the barriers of entries for these companies is extremely high. You will not see disruptions by new players trying to enter the market. So it's incredibly important that we understand this point as well. High-income consumers versus a low-wage earners, the haves and the have-nots. Why is this important? Let me use rent as an example. In the US, the rental market fluctuations can hurt the lower income more than the higher income. Why so? Because the lower income today pays rent. If rent continues to be sticky and very high, it hurts them, it hurts their wealth, it hurts the amount of money they have in the pocket to invest. Contrary to that, the higher income owns the property. Higher rental does not hurt them. In fact, it might benefit them because some of them are multiple property holders. So in that essence, it's important for us to distinguish between these two. We see that the lower segment, the lower income owners are also likely to hurt small and medium enterprises a lot more because as their wallet share contracts, they are less likely to consume, they are less likely to purchase. But this is where we make a distinction. For the higher income earners, interestingly enough, in the United States, top 10% of the US citizens accounts for 50% of all consumption in the United States and owns nearly 85% of financial assets. Therefore, with the market staying buoyant, with the property sector staying buoyant, the wealth effect is real. Consumption will continue, and consumption is a very important part of the US economy. We also think that there is a potential issues, and I had this discussion with Mr. Razak earlier on, hiding behind the soft labor market. There's a distinction between labor supply and labor demand. Today, labor demand is very, very low. New job creation doesn't seem to be happening. But the number is hidden behind lower labor supply. And the reason for lower labor supply today is that the number of Americans willing to come back to the workforce is extremely low. And at the same time, the number of immigrants or migrants coming into the fore is also extremely low. So it does kind of mask the potential need for the economy to reinvigorate itself, to be able to create more jobs. Because if jobs continue to decrease, and if wages continue to slow down, consumption will be the victim. We like artificial intelligence for a number of reasons. Today, many of us are already heavily involved in artificial intelligence. Very often, we do not know that we are even engaging AI today. Today, many firms around the world have been investing heavily into artificial intelligence because it helps productivity, it improves efficiency, and that's the reason why artificial intelligence should not be spoken in the same breath as the dot-com bubble. In fact, if you think about it, many investors are concerned that there's too many similarities. One of the key differences I would like to point out is how AI is being funded today. Today, artificial intelligence is actually funded heavily by hyperscalers and private credit. Hyperscalers in the form of Amazon, Google's, Meta, are reinvesting from their balance sheet into AI infrastructure, building up infrastructures in the AI space. This is a marked difference from where it was in the dot-com phase, when it was largely IPOs, retail investors trying to buy into a hype. If you think about it, at the peak of the dot-com bubble, only 14% of these companies were profitable during the dot-com bubble. Today, we are facing a very different scenario. We also like AI because of the fact that it typically has a higher levels of buyback. And this is important because it helps earnings per share. Now, going beyond US, I think the first slide speaks volume about the importance of diversification. If you had just focused on the United States, you have missed out on a lot of all the performance outside the US market. Today, US valuation is on the high side, admittedly. US large cap is also on the high side. The triangle represents current valuation, and the dot represents median. So we can tell that some of the valuations is rather stretched, but it's stretched for a reason. Corporate USA is extremely good at making money. We need to remember that. Buying into US today is paying a premium. For the soccer or football aficionados out there, it's like buying Cristiano Ronaldo. You're paying for quality football. You're paying for a quality player. And that's the reason why you buy into United States, or at least have US in your overall portfolio. However, we draw your attention to Asia, for example, and emerging markets. Today, valuation is not very demanding. We think that there are a lot of structural and secular tailwinds that's likely to propel Asia going forward, particularly as China emerges as one of the key players in the AI space. We also like countries or economies in Korea, in Taiwan, as they own a big part, or they are part of the entire semicon and the chip making space. Pretty much to my earlier comment, buying into those bottlenecks. Again, on the valuation standpoint, valuations are not undemanding in the Asian space. In fact, we saw this towards the end of last year when Asia significantly outperformed the US market. And we think that this year is likely to be pretty much the same. So, all in all, we think that the US, or rather global equities, will continue to be very well supported, particularly with the Fed easing cycles likely to continue its path towards the end of this year. We remain more neutral on fixed income, but we prefer fixed income in the investment grade space, both in Asia and also in developed markets. But we recommend a duration of 5 to 7 years in view of potential rate cuts throughout the course of this year. Now, very quickly, let me talk about Thailand. Thailand is stuck in a low gear, low inflation environment. We think that Thailand will continue to come in below its potential rate, coming at 1.8% this year. There are structural issues. There are challenges which the new government will have to address relatively quickly. And of course, some of the key highlights is that we need to see the speed of forming this government, the clarity of which the fiscal and monetary policy is likely to lead to, and also execution. The good news is the new Prime Minister has been given a very strong mandate, and the Finance Minister has promised to continue a lot of its existing policy, which represents continuity and, to a certain level, certainty. Headline inflation is likely to come in at negative 0.3 for Thailand, and we expect policy rate to come down by 25 basis points to 1% this month. Last but not least, this is where Thailand is. Below global growth, below global output. This is not a good position to be. You see, when inflation is low, when growth is low, consumers get impacted. Fiscal and monetary policies are largely diluted. Because when consumers start to dial back on their consumption, manufacturers have to cut prices to encourage consumption, right? Profitability gets squeezed, and a result of which they cannot invest because they have less money to invest. Hiring will slow down, and this will feed back into another vicious cycle where consumers will start consuming less. We have an incredible panel of speakers today. You will hear from experts talking about the United States, talking about fixed income, artificial intelligence, and also multi-asset. And I certainly hope that you take away from this session valuable insights, important decision-making tools so that you can make a clear decision on how you want to present your portfolio going forward. With that, thank you very much.
Well, big round of applause for Kun Abel Lim. Well, thank you very much for your dynamic start of the pace for this afternoon นะครับแกได้บอกแบบนี้ครับว่าภาพรวมถอยไปนิดนึงครับปีที่แล้วนะครับถ้าเราเห็นกราฟที่เป็นสีฟ้าๆนะครับเราจะพบว่าสินทรัพย์หลายตัวเติบโตขึ้นเยอะมากนะครับแกยกตัวอย่างเช่นกรณีของจีนนะครับปีที่แล้วเนี่ยได้ดุลการค้ามา 1.1 ล้านUS ดอลลาร์นะถือว่ามหึมามากราคาทองไม่ต้องพูดถึงครับแล้วก็สินทรัพย์แต่ละประเภทก็เติบโตขึ้นมาเยอะพอสมควรทีเดียวนะครับแล้วปีนี้ก็แน่นอนว่าจะเติบโตต่อไปนะครับหมายถึงทั้งโลกนะฮะทีนี้เรื่องตัวเทรนด์ครับแกก็บอกแบบนี้ว่าตัวเทรนด์มีดังต่อไปนี้ครับข้อแรกก็คือตัว K-shape ครับการเติบโตชื่อก็บอกนะ divergence แสดงว่าเติบโตเนี่ยไม่เท่ากันนะฝนตกไม่ทั่วฟ้าบางส่วนก็จะเติบโตเร็วเช่นธุรกิจขนาดใหญ่เองก็ดีธุรกิจที่เกี่ยวข้องกับ AI แต่ขณะเดียวกันบางเซกเตอร์นะครับมันก็จะซึมลงนะครับส่วนประการที่2เองนะครับพูดถึงเรื่องตัว AI เขาบอกว่าหลายคนก็กลัวนะครับบอกว่าเดี๋ยวมันจะไปเหมือนฟองสบู่ .com หรือเปล่าจำได้ไหมครับ25-26 ปีที่แล้ว 2001เนี่ยนะฮะแกบอกว่าต่างกันครับเพราะว่าบริษัทที่เกี่ยวข้องกับ AI ตอนนี้เนี่ยทำกำไรซะเป็นส่วนใหญ่ขณะที่ยุคนั้นเนี่ยนะฮะพบว่าประมาณ 40% เท่านั้นเองนะครับของบริษัทที่เป็น .com ทำผลกำไรเพราะฉะนั้นแตกต่างกันเยอะพอสมควรนะครับส่วนประการที่3การลงทุนไม่ได้มีเฉพาะนะครับสหรัฐอเมริกาแต่เพียงอย่างเดียวนะครับแกบอกสหรัฐเนี่ยแกเปรียบเทียบได้ดีก็การลงทุนในสหรัฐตอนนี้ราคา valuation ก็สูงแล้วนะครับเปรียบเสมือนเรารู้ครับว่านักเตะที่ดีชื่อคริสเตียโนโรนัลโดครับแต่ซื้อมาแล้วแพงครับเพราะฉะนั้นก็ควรที่จะไปศึกษาว่านอกจากสหรัฐอเมริกานี้เนี่ยมีโอกาสที่ไหนบ้างส่วนประเทศไทยเองนะครับหลังจากการเลือกตั้งก็จะมีข้อดีในแง่ของ continuity หรือว่าความต่อเนื่องด้วยนะครับเอาละครับลำดับต่อไปจะมีวิทยากรทั้งหมดอีก4ท่านด้วยกันนะครับที่จะมาคุยในเรื่องที่แตกต่างกันเราจะเริ่มต้นกันนะครับที่สหรัฐอเมริกาครับWell, of course, U.S. markets always set the pace and characterize the economy of the year as far as investment is concerned. And therefore, the next speaker will be talking her insight upon this particular topic, uneven economic growth. Of course, this will enable all of us to learn more about investing in the U.S. นะครับลำดับนี้ครับผมขอเรียนเชิญนะครับวิทยากรท่านต่อมาเลยนะครับ And now I would like to invite upon the stage the Vice President Global Market Strategist JPMorgan Asset Management to share their insights on this particular important topic, uneven economic growth in the U.S. Please join me in welcoming Kun Raiza Rozit.
And first of all, can I just say thank you to UOB for having us, JPMorgan Asset Management. So over the course of the next 15 minutes, what I'll do is really set the scene from how we're thinking about the US economy for 2026. And just starting on the top of it with how we're thinking about the GDP growth trajectory. Now, what I like to do is always to give the answers to the exam first. So in terms of numerical numbers when it comes to GDP, what we're expecting is that the US growth this year will grow above trend, and we have to put a number to it. It will be about 3.5% for the first 3 quarters of the year, and then it would actually go back to trend at about 2% by 4th quarter of the year. And really, if you think about the whole notion of US exceptionalism, what we think and what you're about to hear is that we have a view that the US economy is still relatively constructive. Less so from before, but it really sets a very nice backdrop of how we're even thinking about asset allocation. And it's really pretty much risk on given that what you're about to hear. Now, what makes 2025 different from 2026? Now, in 2025, all you heard about was AI, right? Hyperscalers, spending. And that's true. That is going to continue. That is the first structural factor that we think will support growth. But there's a second pillar of growth in 2026 that didn't exist in 2025, and that is fiscal. But let's start with the first pillar of growth with AI first. Now, what we have found when we look back at recessions all the way back even to the 1920s, what we found is that the contributor to any recession that begins in the US is actually not consumption, but it's actually a pullback in corporate spending. So this is why we have a dashboard, if you will, of some of the key indicators that we think we have to look out for. And in this particular instance, if we want to talk about recession, which obviously we're not penciling a recession, but one thing to watch out for, or a barometer, is fixed investment. And in the top right corner, that chart over there shows you corporate spending as a percentage of GDP. The vertical gray bars are recessionary periods that we've seen going all the way back to the mid-70s. So the idea here is that if corporate America stops spending, that gives us a signal that things are slowing down. But if you can see right now, we're not there yet. We're still sitting above historical average. Not only that, we are in a new era, right, of artificial spending. Every single day you're getting news, especially since we're in the middle of earnings season, where all the hyperscalers are committed to spend $500, $600 billion in 1 year. And you can see it right here already on the left chart over there, where capital spending has risen to the extent that we've not seen a record. And this is going to keep on continue because AI is not a cyclical shift, it's not a cyclical trend, it's a structural trend. So we're not talking about 1-2 years, we're talking about 10-15 years also. So this whole AI corporate spending is going to continue to underpin US growth. But as I mentioned earlier, there is something else. Now, obviously, the last couple of years has been very volatile. We've seen a lot of policies come up from the US, whether is it about immigration, is about tariffs, etc. So we have seen consumer sentiment on the left and business sentiment take a very big hit in the last couple of quarters. While if you look at the right chart, the business sentiment levels have started to improve. But look on the left chart over there, that gray line. Consumer sentiment remains at rock bottom. And this is really because of something that Abel actually spoke about earlier, which is about the K-shaped economy, where you see a large disparity between the upper income and the lower earners. And you can see it most illustrated in the right chart over there, where you're looking at the net worth growth for the upper bracket as well as the lower bracket. Now, what makes 2026 different? Abel already alluded to this earlier, that we are getting some tax refund. Now, fiscal stimulus in 2026 is something that we have not seen, and it comes from various sources. The first of which is tax refund. As part of Trump's OBBA bill, or his big fiscal bill that he pushed through last year, if you were an American worker that worked for tips, worked for overtime, and you paid your taxes last year, your income taxes, you will be getting a refund. Now, if you take a step back and think, who are these people who are actually working for tips, working overtime? Would they belong in that gray line, or would they belong in the purple line? They most likely belong to the lower bracket of income earners. And this bracket of people, the marginal propensity to consume, meaning if I give you $1, it's most likely the dollar will be spent, as compared to giving $1 to somebody in the upper middle income, where they might save that dollar or a portion of that dollar. So this already, would increase consumer spending. That's fiscal stimulus number one. And fiscal stimulus number two is that we are having midterm elections in November in the US. So very typical of very populist, the nature of the developed markets now, and also emerging markets. Ahead of elections, what do you expect? Goodies, right? You expect fiscal rebates, you expect cash handouts. So in the summer months of the year, you are getting another fiscal boost. So think about it. This is like a sugar rush. So it's not protein, it's not meat where it's going to sustain you for a long time, but it's a sugar rush where you're just going to go out and go spend. And this is why, if you take a step back and think what I said earlier about the trajectory of growth, we do expect US growth momentum to be above trend for the first 3 quarters of the year and then settle back to trend. And it's because of these two main fiscal stimulus boosts that US consumers will receive. Now, I have 2 more fiscal boosts, and this is what I call marginal fiscal boosts. The first of which is that the US, among some other countries, is hosting the World Cup this year. Granted, we did hear that President Trump has placed visa restrictions on over 75 countries, and US is not the only country that's hosting the World Cup. We do have the other countries in North America as well. But another marginal fiscal boost is also from the fact that the US is celebrating their 250th year of independence. So you might get some celebration, some fiscal support, etc. But when you put everything together, it is a fiscal boost that we've not seen in a while. Now, how would that translate to some of the indicators that we're looking at? So labor, inflation, etc. So let's start with labor. So as what I've illustrated earlier, we are expecting above trend growth in the US. So the labor market is expected to remain healthy. It's not going to break. So if I have to give you the answer to the exam again, the unemployment rate from where we sit is going to end about 4.2% by the end of this year. Not too far from where we are. And it's not because labor demand is very strong. As Abel alluded to, it's not that we're on the spree of hiring more workers. It's not that. If you're a US corporate right now, you are going to get worried. Where is my next worker going to come from? And that's a labor supply story, which can be demonstrated on the right chart over there. Now, what the right chart is telling you is the labor force growth decomposed by native born versus foreign born. In the last couple of years, the main contributor to labor force growth in the US has been foreign born. But if you look at the very right bar over there, things are starting to change. It's actually the native born that is contributing to the bulk of labor force growth in the US. This is because of immigration policies by the current administration, where it's starting to get very tough to hire a next worker, especially in the more services-oriented sectors. But also think about the fact that baby boomers are leaving the labor force at a pace of about 20,000 every single month. Like most developed countries, even the US is facing structural demographic issues as well. So labor supply is going to be very, very tight for the foreseeable future. So you are going to expect the unemployment rate to remain quite steady from where we are right now. How about inflation? For inflation, giving the answer first again, we expect headline inflation to rise to about 3.5% before settling by about 2% as we enter 2027. Now, the question that we get from our clients all the time is, when is the impact on tariffs ever going to show up in headline inflation? Now, the reason why it has not is because, remember the chart on consumer sentiment I showed you earlier? It is so low. Imagine if I was a large US corporate and I passed the cost to end consumers. Would they buy more or would they buy less? Most likely less, and it's going to affect my volume. But if this year is going to be different, and the US consumers are going to get this sugar rush, they feel slightly better, consumer sentiment lifts slightly, I'm in the position to pass on some of my costs to the end consumers. And that is why you're going to get that transitory shift up in headline inflation. That is the first driver of inflation. The second one is because of all this fiscal boost, you will get core CPI to also increase, and together you are getting the headline inflation rising to about that 3.5%. Now, put everything together, where do we stand with the Federal Reserve? I know that there's been a lot in the news about the new chair, etc. I think our baseline view around that is that central bank independence remains intact. The FOMC votes as a committee, not a singular person, not just by the chair. So with that out of the way, how does the macro fundamentals inform our Federal Reserve monetary policy guidance? We think very similar to UOB, 2 cuts this year. I think the markets is fully pricing in a June cut. We think June and September. But just think about it. If a US economy is growing above trend, is there a need to have an accelerated path towards monetary policy cuts? We don't think so. And if we are right, and hopefully this is true, that central bank maintains that sort of level of independence that it has prided itself with in the past, then there is no need for more insurance cuts beyond what we have seen so far. So you will get rate cuts, but it's going to be at a more gradual, more measured pace because the fundamentals do not require more cuts at this point in time. Now, I painted a very nice picture, but as investors, we still need to be very mindful of a couple of risks, right? And I think the first one is really about the fiscal picture. The fact that we already have seen one of the largest, fiscal bills of late, if things go into a recession, because right now we're not even considering a recession, but if things slow down, if we get another COVID-like such event, that's going to add on to the fiscal pressures that are already affecting the US right now. And that's going to be very troublesome, especially if you're a fixed income investor. Number two, tariffs. Tariffs is obviously something that is dangling over our head, and I'm sure, like myself and a lot of you in the room, we're a little bit fatigued when it comes to talks about tariffs, right? But right now, what's happening in the Supreme Court is that they are really fighting about the legality of reciprocal tariffs. Now, the fact that we've not even gotten a decision tells us already something, that it's not very clear-cut. But for us, the reciprocal tariffs are illegal, and it will get overturned by the Supreme Court. But in its place, we will see more sectoral tariffs. So think about tariffs on semiconductors, tariffs on auto parts, tariffs on pharmaceutical goods. So it's going to be more product-based rather than a blanket tariffs from what we've seen so far. Now, the final risk is something that I think you're going to be talking about a lot more, is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, we are getting midterm elections at the end of this year. Now, as you know, as it stands, the US administration, the Republicans are holding both the upper house and the lower house. Now, our baseline view, and we always have risks around baseline view, right? But it's very important to have a baseline view first. Our baseline view is that the Senate retains the upper house, and the reason for that is that only 4 seats are up in the Senate in the midterm elections. So it's a very, very difficult time for the Democrats to actually flip 4 seats. But the lower house, the House of Representatives, the passage for the Democrats to take that over is a lot higher. And if that's the case, we are going to get a divided government. Now, we've already lived through a divided government. What this means is that you might get maybe more government shutdown. But again, we've lived through it. We had a partial government shutdown last week. Okay, so this is something that is going to be quite normal. But it's always about the policy and not politics. That's what we remind our investors. It's policy, not politics. So in a divided government, what does it mean for policy? What this means is that if you just think about the Republicans and Democrats across the aisle, it's going to be very challenging to pass through domestic policies. So think about healthcare bills, fiscal, etc. It's going to be hard if you have both Democrats and the Republicans bickering across the aisle. But remember that Trump already did something very different this time round as president. He passed through his most important fiscal bill in the first couple of months of his presidency. So that's out of the way. And that's more important for us because the fiscal bill, the OBBA, has a lot of implications from a stock perspective and obviously also from a fixed income perspective. But he might have more leeway with foreign policy. And the first 4 days of this year is a perfect illustration that he has a lot of autonomy over foreign policy. So I think for questions that we get is, does that mean that it's going to, would it be a lame duck administration after this? We don't think so. And that the reason is really because of what we've seen so far with the biggest fiscal bill. So I think in some, we're still painting a very, very constructive picture of the US economy of above trend growth, but we're still very mindful of some of those risks. But I think the biggest takeaway over here and what would prove to be a very volatile here is that it is policies, not politics, that is going to drive, at least from investors' point of view. And with that, I'll conclude my session. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much for your extremely well analyzed and very insightful presentation. Actually, I want to translate every single word of hers, but unfortunately time does not allow, but it's so valuable, the presentation over there. ขอแปลนิดนะครับเพราะว่าเร้าใจมากนะครับ แกบอกแบบนี้ขอเฉลยกันว่าปลายปีนี้เศรษฐกิจสหรัฐจะเป็นยังไงแกบอกว่า3ควอเตอร์แรกนะครับจะเติบโตมากไปกว่ามาตรฐานก็คือประมาณ 3-3.5% ในขณะที่ไตรมาสที่4ครับจะเติบโตพอๆกันนะครับกับตัวมาตรฐานประมาณสัก 2% ด้วยกันถามว่าทำไมครับข้อแรกเลยนะครับไปดูก่อนว่าเวลาที่เศรษฐกิจสหรัฐเป็นยังไงเขาให้ไปดูครับว่าบรรดาองค์กรใหญ่หรือว่า corporate นะครับเวลาที่เขาลงทุนหรือเวลาเขาใช้จ่ายนี่เป็นยังไงบ้างตอนนี้เนี่ยนะครับยังถือว่าอยู่ในทรงที่ดีอยู่มากข้อต่อมาครับก็คือปีที่แล้วถ้าเกิดว่าเวลาเรามองถึงเรื่องของตัว AI หลายคนก็จะบอกว่า AI มันเป็นยังไงบ้างนะครับเขาบอกโดยปกติแล้วเวลาการลงทุนเทคโนโลยีเนี่ยมันอาจจะเป็น cyclical มาแล้วเดี๋ยวก็หายไปแต่ AI ไม่ใช่แบบนั้นครับเพราะมันคือการลงในพื้นฐานระยะยาวด้วยถัดมาถ้าใครจำได้นะครับปีที่แล้วจะมีการอนุมัตินะครับงบประมาณแผ่นดินก็คือ One Big Beautiful Bill Act นะครับของโดนัลด์ทรัมป์ซึ่งในส่วนนี้ใครก็ตามแต่นะครับก็ที่จ่ายภาษีจะได้รับตัวรีฟันตัวภาษีกลับมาและจะมีการใช้จ่ายครับแล้วคนที่จะได้รับภาษีกลับคืนนี้ส่วนใหญ่แล้วเนี่ยครับเป็นคนที่ได้มาแล้วเนี่ยก็จะใช้จ่ายเต็มเลยคือไม่ใช่คนที่มีความมั่งคั่งเพราะได้เงินมาปั๊บใช้จ่ายทันทีประกอบกับปีหน้าครับก็จะมีเหตุการณ์นะครับก็คืออเมริกาก็จะเป็นเจ้าภาพฟุตบอลโลกนะครับ2026นี้นะครับจริงๆไม่ได้เจ้าภาพประเทศเดียวเพราะก็จะมีเม็กซิโกกับแคนาดาด้วยผนวกกับอีกหนึ่งอีเวนต์ใหญ่ที่พวกเราอาจจะลืมนะครับก็คือปีนี้ครบรอบ250ปีแห่งการประกาศเอกราชนะครับของสหรัฐอเมริกาตั้งแต่ปี1776สิ่งเหล่านี้จะทำให้ช่วงต้นปีถึงไตรมาสที่3นี่เนี่ยมีการใช้จ่ายเงินจำนวนเยอะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยก็จะไม่น่าแปลกใจถ้าหากว่าจะมีการใช้จ่ายเงินเยอะและเศรษฐกิจจะเติบโตแต่ว่าอย่างไรก็ตามครับพอมีการใช้จ่ายเงินเยอะอาจจะมีข้อวิตกกังวลครับว่าอัตราเงินเฟ้อนั้นอาจจะสูงถึงประมาณสัก 3.5% แต่อย่างไรก็ตามในระยะยาวแล้วเนี่ยมันจะกลับมาอยู่ในกรอบเป้าหมายคือประมาณ 2% ด้วยถัดมาคือเรื่องการเปลี่ยนผู้ว่าการธนาคารกลางสหรัฐที่หลายคนห่วงนะครับว่าจะอยู่ภายใต้อิทธิพลทางการเมืองหรือเปล่าเธอย้ำบอกว่าไม่นะครับเพราะเวลาตัดสินใจดอกเบี้ยน่ะจะเป็น FOMC ครับไม่ใช่ผู้ว่าแต่เพียงแค่คนเดียวและย้ำนะครับบอกว่าในส่วนนี้เองสหรัฐอเมริกาเขาเน้นเรื่องของตัวการเดินนโยบายมันไม่ใช่เรื่องของการเมืองเพียวๆอย่างไรก็ตามครับปลายปีจะมีการเลือกตั้งที่เรียก midterm election นะครับในเดือนพฤศจิกายนซึ่งในส่วนตรงนี้เองเนี่ยนะครับหลายคนก็คิดว่าจะมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงโมเมนตัมอย่างไรบ้างนะครับก็เธอก็อธิบายว่าที่สภาสูงเองซีเนตจะมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงแค่4คนเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยนัยสำคัญอาจจะไม่เยอะในขณะที่สภาล่างเองอาจจะมีโอกาสในการที่สีน้ำเงินนะครับก็คือเดโมแครตเข้ามาแต่เธอบอกว่าเรื่องนี้เนี่ยความเสี่ยงมากที่สุดก็อาจจะเป็นเรื่องของการที่มี government shutdown เห็นไม่ตรงกันระหว่างฝ่ายบริหารกับฝ่ายนิติบัญญัติอย่างไรก็ตามครับเธอให้ภาพรวมของตลาด US ได้สุดยอดมากขอเสียงปรบมือให้เธออีกครั้งด้วยนะครับ Well big round of applause one more for the speaker ถัดมาเลยนะครับปีที่ผ่านมาเราจะคุยถึงเรื่องของตัว AI เยอะมากนะครับว่าเป็นตัวผลักดันนะครับแต่ว่าหลายคนก็บอกปีนี้เนี่ยแนวโน้มน่าจะเปลี่ยนทิศทางไปนะครับของตัว AI นะครับจะกลายเป็น Beyond Big Tech เมื่อสักครู่เธอได้พูดคำว่า Hyperscalers นะครับก็คือบริษัทยักษ์เลยนะครับที่มีการทำคลาวด์และเทคโนโลยีแล้วก็ได้ประโยชน์จาก AI แต่ว่านับแต่นี้ต่อไปเนี่ยมันอาจจะไม่ใช่เป็นแบบนั้นอีกต่อไปแล้วนะครับ and therefore I would like to move to the second speaker who will be talking about AI artificial intelligence beyond big tech expanding across industries. And now I would like to invite upon the Associate Investment Director of Fidelity International to present her insights on this theme. Please join me in welcoming หลิวหมินเย่ขอเสียงปรบมือให้คุณหลิวหมินเย่ด้วยนะครับ
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for everybody to being here. So if I have a chance to actually go through Mr. Abel's slide earlier before this presentation, I would have skipped a few slides from my presentation because we are very much in line in our key idea. What's beyond the big tech today? And here today, I'm here to pitch you a picture about future AI, about future life, about future in the future how we use AI in our daily life, and where we see the investment opportunity included in this. So sorry for that, because I haven't seen the slide, so this is a repetitive message from what we have already seen. The first chart shows you, yes, market is very narrow, and this is what happened in the last 2 or 3 years. We know that US equity, global equity has delivered a very good performance, and some of you, I hope so, made money from this, but this is very, very narrowing, only concentrated in the IT sector and also the communication service sector. And look at the second chart. What can you see? These are the so-called Max 7 from the US and also what we call the Tech 8 from China. You heard a lot about Max 7 in the headlines, in all the news, But where are they about the China Tech 8? We barely heard any of them over the last 2 years. But look at the performance of the share price. This is in local currency. So for the Chinese one, we have Hong Kong currency or Chinese yuan performance. And for the US one, we have the USD performance. Look at it. What did you miss? And why we did not hear anything about Alibaba, why we did not hear anything about Tencent, NetEase over the last 2 or 3 years? Because the market focus has always been on the hyperscalers, has always been on AI infrastructure, rather than application, rather than the user case. And this is where we are going to in the next phase of AI development. This is about the future. So when we are talking about AI broadening, when we are talking about the broadening of opportunity, what are we talking about? Let me bring you in a real case. Think about AI. Think about the usage of AI in today's life or maybe in future's life. 2 areas where we are going to use AI significantly or like the frontier AI application. 1, autonomous driving. 2nd, robot. So the 3 chart of here, the two first chart actually show you, the first one is about autonomous driving, the second one about humanoid robot. So this is showing us the use or the penetration, the first chart, the penetration of autonomous driving in China. And the stage is where are we now? L2 means you need to drive, but for driver, you need to be hands-on, eyes on. The AI tool is just like a speculator assistant sitting next to you, help you to take some occasionally, like to analysis what's going on the road, but you still need to focus on your drive. L3, which is the light blue line, we pointed it, which going to be launched this year. L3 means the driver, you can be eyes off, hands off, only minds on your driving. Think about it, it's going to be implemented starting from this year. And what is behind the autonomous driving for this, what is the most important technology is what we call the LiDAR, or the light detection radar, or you can call it a laser radar. And moving to the humanoid robot case, what's the most important thing for humanoid robot? It can move, it knows what's around it, and what is required behind the technology. It's again, LiDAR. And guess who are the biggest suppliers of LiDAR? Who is behind this future technology? Global top 10 players, 9 of them are from Asia. 9 of the global super supplier of LiDAR are from Asia. So this is what we are talking about, the future user case and why Asia is leading the next wave. Because we are deeply embedded, and this is where we see the diffusion happens here in Asia with all these innovative companies in Asia. They are not the AI capex spender, they are not the hyperscalers, but they are the ones who can actually use AI, use technology. This is where the model meets our daily life, and this is what we need for our future life. And this is where we find investment opportunity for global technology strategy. So when we talk about this diffusion, where are we see the diffusion? The LiDAR is only one example. And in the next 2 slides, I'm going to walk you through several occasions or several themes. We are going to see AI fully embedded in our daily life. So the first 2 is more about consumption and also industrial innovation. Focus on the first one about consumption. Consumer technology here today in China or in Asia is way leading compared to some of the developed markets. When we talk about consumer technology or when we talk about consumer services, the platform is no longer the same as what we have in the past life. It's not only e-commerce, it's not only trip, like the trip agent where you can book your air ticket or where you can book your hotel online. It's actually an AI agent which can help you to do every planning at a single time. So imagine in the future, you just open your smartphone and you put down, I want to make a 3-day trip in Bangkok. I'm going there with my parents, or I'm going there with my kids. Help me plan the 3-day trip. And that's the plan it can give to you. This is the future use case which we are talking about consumer technology, consumer AI usage. And in the first picture, you can see everything is connected at home. So this is IoT. This is not about future life. This is already happening. In a lot of the young generation's home in China, you just walk indoor and you say, open the curtain, open the TV. We had an interesting discussion today during lunchtime, like a lot of our parents doesn't really know how to use the smart TV these days. But in the future, you don't need to be struggle with the 2 monitor anymore. You can just ask them, turn on the TV and turn to which channel. This is what we are going to use AI to help our life much easier in the future. And this is also the investment opportunity we see in Asia. And the second one about industrial automation. Industrial automation is no longer only about these arms moving somewhere to put the parcels or put the different components somewhere. Industrial automation with AI embedded is about the whole process chain. Imagine that you have the robotic to help you to planning from the first step to the very last step. And also it's about the quality inspection. It's also about how to improve efficiency and also maybe meet your environmental standard and also the production cost standard. This is a use case of industrial automation, and we also see this emerging here in Asia. Furthermore, related to industrial, something we will use is about software. Software including industrial software and also our daily used software. So in the future, AI is not only about model, it's something in your pocket, it's something sitting next to you, it's assistant. And I think a lot of you recognize this thing, it's Copilot. And I think a lot of you may be a business owner here sitting today. So think about the AI adoption in software. Are you going to change your software completely because it has an AI function? Or are you more willing to pay a bit more to your current system, which is already fully integrated into your business or into your daily life, just because they adopted the AI function? I think a lot of us will choose the second one because we're already used to the system and it's all fully embedded with all the data and with our daily life. We are used to it, so we are willing to pay a bit more for the AI function. So that's why for software, the winner for software within AI adoption is not the one who built the model anymore. It's actually the one who can use AI, who can embed AI in their current software model. Because there are some critical one-step software, and there are some software which is using your company data. You are not willing to change them because of the other one just provide the AI function. So the biggest software company right now in the world who can adopt very well AI into their current tool will benefit from this AI adoption wave. And the last one, logistics. What are we talking about logistics in AI? Today, we already have a logistic company like the service platform, which is providing services with their AI tool to matching the truck driver and also the goods owner. So think about before, when you have a big load of goods you need to send to somewhere, you need to call the truck driver one by one, or you need to check with their agent. But today, you just put your orders like you're calling an Uber. You put everything online and they are matching it directly for you. And in the future, logistics is not only about that, it's the full logistic chain. So logistics for small companies or for business owners is no longer a cost center. It will be your strongest weapon. It can help you, the AI system can help you from cost reduction and to help you plan the whole predictable system. So this is what we're talking about with AI in the logistic. And consumption, robotics, humanoid robot, factory usage, manufacturing, software, logistics, this is the future AI usage, and this is where we see the investment opportunities with the global technology strategy, not only the US big names. And we talk about how Asia or China or some of the emerging markets is leading in this change. But why can we do that? What do we have here in Asia to make us so strong in AI adoption? We have some leverages, we have some advantages. So first, we are a big population, like Asia, China, India, some of the countries in this region, we have the largest population. The largest population also means we have a high creativity. The creativity and also the demand, the needs of future AI is within everybody's mind. I want AI to help me to do this. You want AI to help you to do other things. So the creativity we have in this region is a huge resource we have. That means the talent we have in the region, and whatever you have in mind, you want AI to help you pour coffee, some startup has the same thinking, and they are putting this into their product. So this is the thing we are talking about. Looking at the patent application, this is only the patent application in English language. And China is already the largest country in terms of the patent application. A lot of new ideas just come up from the region, from emerging market. And we are good at it. We are rich in data. We have a lot of data to train our AI. We have a lot of new thinkings. And we have a lot of new demand in this region. And this is where the future AI goes. Because the AI needs to serve our future life. It's not only about model. It's about our daily needs. And also, why we are so good at adopting it. Because we grow up with this AI technology or the technology change here in Asia. We do not have the legacy system as what we see in the developed market. And we are used to do everything on our phone with the smart applications. This is the advantage we have in Asia. And this is why we can see AI adoption happening faster in emerging market in Asia compared to the rest of the world. So this comes to my last presentation, last slide. What are we talking about when we're talking about investing in AI in a global technology strategy? What are we talking about investing in AI today? We are investing for future life. We are investing for our future needs with AI. So with this thinking in mind, AI is no longer a single trade. It's no longer about US hyperscalers, US mega caps. It's about all the applications, all the companies we meet on our daily life. So we need to diverse our investment from the US to a broader thing and to a broader market, which means Asia and the emerging market. And the winners will be global and also more diverse across sectors, across things, from consumption applications, smart devices, the software, logistic, manufacturing, industrials, and everywhere. It's just like everywhere in your daily life. And what is most important in this environment? Stay active and stay very selective. Because the AI trend, as all the speakers already confirmed, the AI is a structural trend. But we do have the concern about if AI is a bubble. From our view, AI capex is a bubble, but AI is not. So stay active, stay selective, and pick the right investor for you in this environment. Select the right thing for you for future technology investment. This is the most important thing, and this is where the future goes. Thank you. Thank you for today.
Well, thank you very much for your eye-opening presentation, Liu Mingyue from Fidelity นะครับเธอบอกแบบนี้ครับเวลาที่เรานึกถึง AI นะครับเราก็จะนึกถึง Hyperscaler นะครับของสหรัฐแต่ว่าบางทีเราลืมนึกไปนะครับว่าการพัฒนา AI ไม่ได้กระจุกตัวอยู่ที่ภูมิภาคเดียวนะครับ AI ของเราก็ทั้งภูมิภาคเอเชียก็ไม่น้อยนะครับเรานึกถึง Max 7 ครับแต่มีสักกี่ครั้งครับที่เรานึกถึง Tech 8 นะครับในจีนเองแต่ว่าบางครั้งครับเราอาจจะได้ยินชื่อของบริษัท Hyperscaler ของสหรัฐเนี่ยบ่อยกว่าเช่นอาลีบาบาเถิงซินหรือว่า Tencent นะครับและอีกหลากหลายบริษัทด้วยกันทั้งที่จริงๆมีวิวัฒนาการสูงมากนะครับเธอก็อธิบายให้ฟังถึง use case ครับของ AI ที่จะมีการกระจายตัวไปหลายส่วนด้วยกันนี้นะครับยกตัวอย่างครับเช่นกรณีของ consumer AI usage นะครับแกบอกว่าปัจจุบันนี้เนี่ยดูแล้วมันอาจจะไกลครับแต่ในอนาคตมันจะใกล้ตัวเรามากขึ้นอีกส่วนนึงครับ autonomous driving ก็คือการขับขี่ยานยนต์แบบที่ไม่มีคนขับนะครับแกบอกมันมีหลายเลเวลนะครับบางทีก็เรียกว่า hand free ไม่ต้องใช้มือจับ eye free ไม่ต้องใช้มองสูงสุดก็เรียก mind free คือไม่ต้องใช้ใจด้วยซ้ำไปเรื่อยๆนะฮะอนาคตมันจะมีการพัฒนาไปอีกหลายขั้นนอกเหนือไปจากนี้ครับถ้าดูในระดับของตัวอุตสาหกรรมเองนะครับแต่ก่อนเราอาจจะเห็นคนที่โอเปเรตหุ่นยนต์ที่อยู่ในตัวอุตสาหกรรมแต่ในอนาคตแล้วเนี่ยตัวปัญญาประดิษฐ์จะใช้นะครับซึ่งสิ่งนี้เองครับในเอเชียจะเติบโตขึ้นอย่างมหาศาลครับส่วนหนึ่งเลยต้องไม่ลืมว่าถ้าเรามองตลาดจีนเอง 1,400 ล้านคนนะครับเขามีข้อมูลมหาศาลมหึมาในการที่จะเทรนตัวปัญญาประดิษฐ์หรือว่า AI ได้อีกส่วนหนึ่งครับการผลิตฮาร์ดแวร์เขายกตัวอย่างมาตัวคือตัวไลด้าครับไม่ใช่เรดาร์นะไลด้า9 ใน 10บริษัทผู้ผลิตไลด้าที่ใหญ่ที่สุดในโลก อยู่ในเอเชียทั้งนั้นเลยนะครับนอกจากนี้ยังจะมี use case เพิ่มเติมอีกมากมายมหาศาลนะครับและสิ่งเหล่านี้เองก็เลยเธอเลยบอกว่าอยากให้มองโลกกว้างๆนะครับเพราะว่าเรื่องของ AI ไม่ใช่มาแล้วไปนะครับแต่มันอยู่อีกยาวนานแล้วมันจะมีความเกี่ยวข้องกันนะครับกับทุกๆอุตสาหกรรม across industries คือมีความหมายไม่ได้กระจุกตัวอยู่เฉพาะบริษัทเทคแต่ว่าจะเป็นการเพิ่มผลิตภาพในหลายๆส่วนด้วยกันนะครับเราคุยกันมา2ธีมแล้วนะครับเราไปดูธีมต่อไปครับแน่นอนที่สุดว่า asset allocation หรือว่าการกระจายการลงทุนในสินทรัพย์ต่างๆมีความสำคัญมากนะครับดังนั้นเนี่ยลำดับต่อไปนะครับอยากจะเชิญวิทยากรที่จะพูดคุยถึงเรื่องของการลงทุนและการกระจายการลงทุนส่วนหนึ่งที่สำคัญมากครับหลายคนอาจจะลืมนึกไปนะครับถึงเรื่องของคำว่า divergence การเติบโตของภูมิภาคต่างๆและภูมิภาคเอเชียเองนะครับถือว่ามีการเติบโตไม่น้อยทีเดียวนะครับซึ่งในส่วนนี้Asian Equity ก็คือการลงทุนในหลักทรัพย์นะครับในภูมิภาคของเราน่าจะเป็นอีกตัวเลือกหนึ่งที่มีความสำคัญด้วยนะครับ Well next theme we'll be talking about increasing divergence across regions and global diversification and of course opportunities in Asian equity which has become more important ever particularly in focus as a key matter of the growth engine and for this particular topic I would like to invite upon the stage the third speaker of today. He is the head of multi-asset strategy UOB Asset Management from Singapore. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Anthony Joseph Raza.
Thank you, Dr. Witt. Hello, everybody. So the views I express tend to come from a multi-asset background. My team and myself, we spend a lot of time thinking about which asset classes are going to perform well this year and where should we invest in the world and geographically and so forth. And so I think as echoed previously, I think ourselves and many investors around the world really like what we're seeing. We think it's going to be another good year where broad asset classes are going to do well. It's going to be a good year for investing. And within asset classes, we do think equities look really good and that they'll probably lead the way with the highest returns again. We think this for two main reasons. So firstly, when we were analyzing the path last year, we were concerned that we were seeing a number of risks. There was a number of policy headwinds that was affecting the world and the US economy. And although we were optimistic we could get through, we were quite worried. As we end 2025 and go into 2026, those risks, those headwinds we were dealing with last year are turning into tailwinds. Rashida highlighted it earlier, but we go from major sort of fiscal headwinds into fiscal stimulus. And if we can survive last year, then this year looks all the stronger. The second thing we talk about is, especially myself, I sit in an asset management team, and I have teams of analysts that are analyzing stocks around the world, and they're analyzing the tech stocks like Minue was highlighting, and they are very excited about what they're seeing. And then I speak to investors like you every day, and when I talk to investors, they're more enthusiastic than I've seen in a long time. And I just know when we put these exciting themes in a room with these enthusiastic investors, it feels like it's going to be a hot market. So let me show you a couple charts that we share with clients just to sort of capture some of these thoughts that we're seeing. So firstly, this is just a chart of just long-term secular bull markets, and specifically this is just capturing the US market. But I think there's a couple things that we've been talking to clients about here. So firstly, I would say, myself, I started in 2008 at UOB Asset Management. So it was like right at the bottom of that correction before this blue line, which started this new secular bull market. And I would say my experience since this time period is I spent the first 10 years at UOB Asset Management talking to clients like you who were somewhat traumatized by the depth of the correction in 2008. And also in that period of 2008, if you look back, it actually had been almost a decade since investments had really panned out and made money for people. By that time, in that first several years, there were many economic problems in the world. Stocks weren't as, giving you a good track record at that point. And I spent many years encouraging people to diversify their portfolios and get more into equities, and investors were slow to do so. I personally found things changed during COVID. So during COVID, there was a lot I was scared about. But when I talked to investors like you, investors were very quick to get back into the market. They were buying that dip so quickly, I couldn't believe it. And I don't think they were wrong, but I was surprised they were almost ahead of me in terms of, getting enthusiastic. And ever since then, my clients I speak to, they've bought every dip. They're very enthusiastic, and they're asking me every day, what's the next theme? Should we do more in AI, or is there something else? And so I think if you got specialists in the room like Mingyue explaining what's happening in tech, our team sees so much growth. I just think where we are, if there's a period it reminds me then of, so myself, I started investing, my first job was in New York City in 1990. So that was kind of towards the beginning of this other blue phase. And so I would say what I'm seeing now feels so much like the 1990s. And that has pluses and minuses. I think when I make this comparison to the dot-com enthusiasm, people have a negative view because obviously that ended badly. But as an investor through it, I recall my mentors in like 96 saying, they're very concerned about what they're seeing. This looks like a bubble. And those wise investors, they were wrong for like 4 years before they were proven incorrect, or before they were proven correct. Markets did 20% per year. In those periods, investors seem a lot like now, excited to invest in the next theme, and the investment opportunities were as exciting in the corporates as we're seeing now. So I think there's a danger about hot markets like this, but if you were to ask me, this feels more like a 97 than a 2000. And so if you were investing in 97, especially then in the US market, things went hot for 3 more years doing 20% per year. So I would have some warnings about being diversified and being careful that this may end sooner than expected. But at the same time, I wouldn't be too old-fashioned about the way you're looking at this very changing world, and be aware that especially those last years in the 90s, that slope of that curve gets very steep in these hot markets. So that's one just broad theme I wanted to highlight. The second one I think is similar, that's been highlighted before, that the policy headwinds last year were enormous. The tariffs were a big danger to the global economy. And quite honestly, the world did better than our economists thought they would. We thought the global tariffs would weigh on global economies around the world as the US imposed all these tariffs, and we thought it would hurt the US economy. And it did a bit. The growth in the US fell in the first half of the year, but kind of stabilized by the second half of the year. And so as we've gotten through that, as we look forward to next year, the tariff issues are more in the back window now. They're not having a marginal effect on the coming quarters of growth like they did last year. And on top of that, as Rashida highlighted, the tax cuts have many benefits. It should trigger more consumer spending. It should, there's incentives for business to do more CapEx. And so what we're seeing is headwinds turning into tailwinds. And so if we were able to get through last year, we're liking what we see and the chances of having another good year. Additionally, we have the monetary policy. So it was really only towards the second half of last year where we started to get interest rate cuts. We would expect some more in 2026, and that creates a good backdrop for businesses and for investments and for fixed income. So we like what we're seeing. The other thing I would just break it down to is valuations can be a little bit high. Especially, I guess, region by region, you have to analyze this. But the thing is, we don't need any more gains in valuations. And I think if we're an enthusiastic market, I doubt we do a lot of downgrades in valuations. And so what we really need is earnings growth. And so there's a lot of numbers on this chart, but if you look at this column in red, the second column to the right is the earnings growth expected for 2026. And the simple message is pretty much every region in the world, we're expecting double-digit earnings growth. And these numbers are looking as firm as I've seen for years, and as broad-based as I've seen in years. So I think, again, if there's one thing that really makes me confident about the global economy, it's this earnings trend and the growth that we're getting. And I'd make another point. Just, I think there's concerns about the over-investments we may be getting in AI, and especially all the CapEx around data center build-outs and so forth. But the evidence we're seeing is everything that's getting built is getting used. And that's not what always happens. Historically, there have been sort of booms in like fiber and other technologies, and they build a lot and they don't get used for a while. They used to have this term called dark fiber, where they put out all this fiber and it took years before they worked into it. But for what's getting built now, it's still getting used very rapidly, and that kind of just makes us confident about the growth we're seeing, at least for another year. And then a final theme I wanted to highlight is just we continue to like Asia. We've been overweight Asia for the last year, and we still think it has pretty solid grounds. When I explain what I like about Asia, I go back to a couple mentors that I had. So one mentor told me, if you want to know when to invest in Asia, they said, do it when the US dollar is weak, and be cautious on Asia when the US dollar is strong. The second mentor said, invest in Asia when China's doing well. Be careful of investing in Asia when China's struggling. So I always use those as my first two checks. So firstly, this chart, a little bit busy, but it's highlighting the trend in the US dollar versus, so that would be the, if you can look at this yellow box here, this is a period where you can see at the top, the blue line is the dollar, and when the dollar is strengthening, this, the green line, which is the world versus the US market, you can see goes down. So when US dollar is going up, then global markets outside the US struggle. And in the gray boxes, you can see every time the US dollar is weak, the rest of the world ends up outperforming. And what we're looking at right now is, I think, a pretty decisive trend where the US dollar does not look strong. It looks kind of weak. It's being contributed to by somewhat erratic policies out of the US and the fact that global growth remains strong. So on the first check, my first mentor would say the outlook for Asia looks pretty solid. On the second check, I would just say for China, China has a lot of strengths that I think the world underestimates. It has low interest rates. It has a stable currency. Its government policies are better balanced than many regions in the world. It has huge advantages in industrial capabilities, and in many of the leading technologies, it's a clear leader. The US is a leader in, it'll be a leader in this chips and the cloud infrastructure that businesses will use around AI, but so much of the emerging technology, actually China is leading, and I think the markets are kind of underestimating it, and the valuations are better. And now that the economy has been a little bit more stable and the property issues have been worked out, we just highlight the performance here on equities in what we call Greater China, and it's just looking really solid, and we continue to think this is a support for our broader call on Asia as well as China. So I think those are some of the main themes we wanted to highlight. I think it's echoed by previous, I'm echoing things that have been said by previous speakers, but those are the things I'm most enthusiastic about. I would just end on just the words of caution and risks that we do see also. So I think, like Abel highlighted one of them, we are concerned about employment trends in the US. I think it's a complicated story, but if in fact you have slowing contributions to income, that's more people with jobs and more people with earnings growth in their jobs. If you don't have income growing, then it's hard to make spending grow. And if you don't have spending growing, then businesses don't have enough to be confident about making lots of CapEx investments. So we're kind of worried about that trend, but it's being offset by several things. It's being offset by the wealth effects of the stock market. That's generating new capacity to spend, and it's also being offset by just businesses that have a lot of investments to do and therefore spending in the economy. And so we see that we would come down on the view that it looks like the momentum's strong enough to at least last another year, probably more. But I think in the end we end up with a view that we see risks, but it doesn't feel imminent, and therefore we're optimistic about this year's investments. Okay, I'll stop there, and thank you all, and turn it over to the next speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony Joseph Raza, the Senior Director, Head of Multi-Asset Strategy, UB Asset Management อย่างที่ได้เห็นนะครับว่าท่านถอยกลับไปเลยนะครับเราไปดูกราฟกันนะครับแล้วก็จะพบว่าวิวัฒนาการของตลาดทุนสหรัฐนี้นะครับกรอบ150 ปีหน้าตามาเป็นยังไงมีขึ้นมีลงแต่ยังไงก็ตามท้ายที่สุดก็ผงกโหขึ้นอยู่เสมอเลยนะครับอย่างหนึ่งครับที่ฝากไว้ท่านบอกว่าในอดีตนะครับจะมีหลายๆบริษัทเลยทำเทคโนโลยีขึ้นมา build แต่ว่าไม่ได้ use ครับแต่ในยุคปัจจุบันแตกต่างไปแล้วครับ build คือคิดขึ้นมาทำออกมาและได้ใช้จริงด้วยนะครับและสิ่งเหล่านี้เองนะครับก็ทำให้มีโอกาสต่อไปในอนาคตการใช้จ่าย capital expenditure ก็จะสูงขึ้นแต่สหรัฐอเมริกาคงไม่ใช่แค่ประเทศเดียวครับแล้วก็ยกตัวอย่างถึงการเติบโตนะครับของจีนนะครับซึ่งมีองค์คาพยพที่หลากหลายมี supply chain ที่หลากหลายเพิ่มเติมดังนั้นเดี๋ยวคงได้กลับมาคุยกันอีกว่าโอกาสนะครับของตัวหุ้นจีนนะครับจะเป็นอย่างไรเพราะเมื่อเปรียบเทียบกันดูแล้วคิดว่าเป็นอีกหนึ่งตลาดที่มีความน่าสนใจด้วยนะครับแน่นอนว่าในเรื่องของโลกที่มีความไม่แน่นอนนะครับจะมีสินทรัพย์ประเภทหนึ่งครับที่ชื่อมันก็บอกแล้วว่า fixed incomeนะครับซึ่งสามารถที่จะเดินหน้าเป็นกลไกในการป้องกันความเสี่ยงนะครับท่ามกลางบรรยากาศที่ volatile หรือมีความผันผวนสูงนี้ได้ด้วยนะครับดังนั้นผมขอนำไปสู่วิทยากรอีกหนึ่งท่านก่อนที่จะมีการพูดคุยบนเวทีนะครับสำหรับหัวข้อถัดไปครับ Fixed Income Global and Asian Perspective นะครับลำดับนี้ผมขอเรียนเชิญวิทยากรครับ and now it is my pleasure to invite upon the stage our fourth speaker for today Managing Director and Head of Fixed Income Portfolio Management Asia UBS Asset Management to share his insight please join me in welcoming Mr. Raymond Gee ขอเสียงปรบมือให้คุณ Raymond Gee นะครับ
Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be invited by UOB today to discuss global fixed income with you. I'm a portfolio manager from UBS Asset Management, and I have been managing fixed income for over 23 years. I'm based in Hong Kong, so if you look at my family, it's very diversified. I and my wife, we have 2 boys. They are like equities, a lot of upside potential, but they are also volatile because we know boys will leave home one day. So at the same time, we also have 1 dog and 2 cats at home. Why? Because they are very similar to fixed income. We know there are certain they will welcome us when we arrive home. So everyone loves them. So today, before we discuss fixed income, a very quick introduction on UBS Asset Management first. You know, UBS Asset Management, we are one of the largest asset manager in the world with over $2 trillion assets under management. And in terms of product lines, we have products in traditional investments, in alternatives. We also have partnership solution. And especially I want to point out that in our funds, 65% of funds under our management are rated 4 to 5 star by Morningstar ranking. So we do have very competitive investment performance globally. And in terms of our market view for this year, firstly, for the US, we believe we are still in the middle of the rate cut cycle by the Fed. And we don't see recession risk for this year. So the market will continue to be favorable for fixed income because of the potential rate cuts in the US. And for Europe, the low growth is always a problem for Europe, right? But into this year, we do see an improving cyclical outlook on Europe, especially because of more fiscal stimulus. So this will also be positive. And for emerging markets, as I will explain more later, we are very positive on emerging markets. Since last year, they have already performed very strongly, and we believe they will continue to outperform this year. Not only because of the very strong fundamentals, but also because of the weakening US dollar trend, and also a lot of AI innovation from countries like China. So into different asset classes, for fixed income, we do believe 2026 will continue to be a very positive year for fixed income. So we continue to like duration because of the potential rate cuts by the Fed. And on global credit side, we do believe, as of today, Asia and the emerging market bonds are the sweet spots of global fixed income. So we continue to overweight Asia and the emerging market bonds. And on global equities, we continue to overweight. We also continue to favor alternatives because of the diversification benefits to the portfolio. So on global fixed income, let's take a look at the performance of different fixed income asset class together. So the left-handed table shows the total return of different fixed income asset classes in US dollar over time. So from here, you can clearly see there is no single fixed income asset class that will outperform every year. For example, if you stick your fixed income investment in US investment grade all the time, it will underperform in 2021 and 2023 with selective returns, which was not ideal, right? But from here, we can also see over the past 3 years, US high yield, Asian high yield, and the emerging market bonds outperformed very strongly one by one, all with over 10% total return. So the question is how to identify the outperformers and avoid the underperformers in fixed income space every year. So from our point of view, it's very important to understand the global credit cycles. And from UBS point of view, we do believe currently we are still in a credit up cycles. So typically, Asian and emerging market bonds will continue to outperform in global fixed income space. So that's why for 2026, for global fixed income, we do recommend Asian and emerging market bonds. They already outperformed over the past 2 years, but we believe they will continue to outperform in global fixed income space. So there are several reasons for that. Firstly, I think it's very clear to everyone, right? If you look at the GDP growth, emerging markets are always the place with higher growth than developed markets. So that's why we also have more investment opportunities in emerging markets and in Asia here. And also the beauty of emerging markets is we have so many countries globally, so we can always capture different opportunities in a very diversified and also uncorrelated way. Give you some recent examples. It's very true, right? Over the past 2 years, the Trump policy has brought a lot of uncertainties to emerging markets. But the reality is, in most countries' cases, finally, it turned to be quite a positive for the sovereign bonds to outperform. So you know, over the past 2 to 3 months, right, because of U.S. intervention, the Argentina US dollar denominated sovereign bonds have rallied over 50% in price since last October. And the Venezuela bonds also rallied over 30% year to date. So these are the two recent opportunities we have captured in our emerging market bond portfolio based on our good understanding on geopolitical risk and the domestic economic situation. Secondly, last year we also did a very bottom-up credit analysis on global markets based on our global credit research team, and we did a default forecast for this year. So from here you can clearly see this year in terms of default rate, we are forecasting lower rates in emerging markets in Asia than the US. This is really because after COVID, for emerging markets, for Asian countries, right, they continue to recover and improve. Especially for Asia here, we already gone through the China real estate defaults, right? We are already out of that. So that's why moving forward, we are seeing a much more healthy fundamental in emerging markets in Asia. So the default rates actually will be lower. And also because of that reason, in terms of total return forecast, right, we are forecasting a much higher total return for Asia and emerging market bonds than developed markets for this year. Thirdly, if we look at the valuation, right, either we compare Asian and emerging market bonds to developed markets or to their historical valuation, they are still traded much more attractive than developed markets. So that's another strong reason we continue to be positive on Asian and emerging market bonds this year. Another big factor is about the US dollar, right? So you know, the dollar started to depreciate since earlier last year, mainly because of the uncertainties Trump has created, right? So we do see this trend will continue. So that will definitely help the performance of emerging market bonds as well. Another favorable factor is on the technical side, because you know, for emerging market bonds, over the past 4 to 5 years, because of the weaker sentiment after COVID, the net supply of bonds actually has been negative, which means we have less and less bonds available to buy in emerging markets. But on the other hand, since second half of last year, emerging market bonds already received very strong inflows from global investors. So today we are facing a situation, there are less supply of bonds, but increased demand. So this will also be a very strong tailwinds to support emerging market bonds from a technical perspective. So let's also zoom in a little bit into the Asia credit market, because you know, Asia is always part of emerging markets, right? So in Asia here, we do have a US dollar denominated bond market as well. The total market cap is about $1 trillion US dollar. So it's already a very big market. And it's about 1/3 of emerging market bonds. Maybe it's a surprise to you, but over the past 2 to 3 years, either you look at the left-hand chart, which is the overall Asian credit market, including both investment grade and high yield, or you look at the right-hand chart, which is the Asian high yield market, they performed very strongly. And the reason is really because in 2022-23, right, because of the China real estate defaults, the whole market was traded at a very distressed valuation, and for market sentiment as well. So that's why starting from 2024, when the default cycle finally going to an end. This market has rebounded very, very strongly from a very distressed level. So even today, we continue to be positive on Asian credit market, and we do see this trend will continue for this year. And also for the Asian high yield market, maybe we can see a lot of investors, they haven't even realized today that there has been a very big structure change in the Asian high yield market in the way that if you look at the pie chart here, right, 5 years before, China real estate was 38% of the overall Asian high yield market, a very concentrated sector. But today, China real estate is only 4% of the market. Why? Because a lot of Chinese property developers have already defaulted. And after defaults, they were already out of the market. So that's why today, if you look at the Asian high yield market, for the 4% China real estate exposure, they are basically surviving developers, right? Either state-owned enterprises or strong private companies like Long4. So they are survivors, and they are going to gain more market share in China's housing market going forward. So you can see this market, as of today, is becoming more diversified in terms of sectors than before, rather than purely concentrated in real estate. And also the credit quality is also much, much better than before. That's another strong reason we are positive on Asian high yield for this year as well. Similarly, in Asia here, if we look at market valuation, right, especially for Asian high yield, you can see we are still traded at a very wide spread premium over US and Euro high yield. So this is really because even though credit fundamentals have been improving over the past 2 to 3 years, but the investors' sentiment are still lagging behind. That's why this market still provides very attractive valuation to fundamental investors. So the last point I also want to make for Asia is about China. You know, I'm based in Hong Kong, and I travel to mainland China more than 10 times every year. And especially over the past 2 to 3 years, my biggest impression on China is even you go to very low-tier cities in China, right? You can see they have already built up all the necessary infrastructure for future growth. This is not only about high-speed trains, about roads, but also about the whole manufacturing capability, right? So the pictures here shows one fourth-tier cities I visited in China's Yunnan province before, right? So you can see even in this small city, they have very good high-speed train station. They have very high-end residential place and also shopping malls. So nowadays in China, even for people living in lower tier cities, as far as they have a house, they have income, they can have a very convenient and a low-cost living. So that's very, very different. That's why I'm very positive on China in the medium to long term. And also, I think that will also give you a lot of comfortability to invest into Asia and emerging market bonds. So to summarize, for 2026, in global fixed income, for UBS Asset Management, we do see Asia and the emerging market bonds are the sweet spots. And we do see they have very high potential to outperform again. We like the strong fundamentals. We like the technicals. On the valuation side, they are not as cheap as 2 years before, but compared to developed markets, they are still very cheap. So that's why we do see for fixed income, the major opportunities for this year will be Asia and emerging market bonds. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Kun Raymond Gee, the Managing Director, Head of Fixed Income Portfolio Management Asia, UBS Asset Management ตรงไปตรงมานะครับผมว่าเมื่อสักครู่เอากราฟให้ดูครับระหว่างนะครับทางด้านของ Fixed Income ถ้าเกิดว่าไปดูนะครับหุ้นกู้ของตลาดที่เป็น Developed Market แล้วเนี่ยก็เติบโตไปอยู่แต่ถ้าเกิดว่าเราลองเทียบนะครับกับ Emerging Markets โดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งเลยนะครับผมว่าของจีนเองนะครับก็ทำหน้าที่ได้ดีพอสมควรแค่บอกราคามันไม่ได้ถูกนะครับแต่ว่าถ้าเกิดว่าเทียบกันกับ Developed Markets ไปแล้วเนี่ยถือว่าน่าสนใจมากคนจำนวนมากมายห่วงแบบนี้ครับบอกว่าที่ผ่านมาเราเคยได้ยินข่าวนะครับหุ้นกู้ของบริษัทอสังหาริมทรัพย์จีนนะครับซึ่งตอนนั้นก็ถือว่าร่อแร่มากๆในช่วงหลังจากโควิดนะครับแต่ว่าตรงนั้นเนี่ย default ไปแล้วคือผิดนัดชำระหนี้ไปแล้วดังนั้นเนี่ยพวกที่เหลืออยู่ก็คือถูกฟิลเตอร์มาแล้วนะครับว่าเป็นหุ้นกู้ที่ถือว่าให้ผลตอบแทนที่ดีแล้วก็มีความเสี่ยงต่ำแกใช้คำว่า survivors พูดง่ายๆนะครับที่มีอยู่ในตลาดตอนนี้ก็คือกลุ่มผู้ที่เป็นผู้รอดชีวิตมาว่าง่ายๆเทียบ valuation ไปแล้วนะครับอย่างที่บอกไม่ได้ถูกครับแต่ขณะเดียวกันไปเทียบกับที่อื่นแล้วเนี่ยถือว่าราคาน่าดึงดูดใจนะครับและในเรื่องของความเสี่ยงเทียบกันกับอดีตแล้วถือว่าต่างกันพอสมควรทีเดียวแล้วภาพหลังที่แกให้ดูนะครับแกบอกตัวแกอยู่ที่ฮ่องกงนะครับแต่แกไปบางจีนทีนะครับปีนเป็น10 ผลแล้วแกก็ให้ดูนะครับภาพของสถานีไฮสปีดเทรนนะครับเมืองที่แกโชว์ให้ดูเนี่ยชื่อว่าเมืองเหลียวเหอคำว่าเหลียวก็แปลว่ามันคือแดนไกลนะฮะเขาบอกขนาดพื้นที่ที่มันห่างไกลมากเนี่ยยังมีคนไปสร้างไฮสปีดเทรนเลยก็มีความหมายว่ายังมีบริษัทอสังหาที่ดีๆนะครับแล้วก็บริษัทที่พร้อมจะลงทุนให้กระจายความเจริญไปที่อีกเยอะมากมายมหาศาลเลยจะบอกใครก็ตามที่มีความสนใจ Fixed Income นะครับลองมาดูนะครับ Fixed Income ของส่วนที่เป็น Emerging Markets รวมถึงตลาดที่อยู่ในจีนเพราะว่าน่าสนใจเป็นอย่างยิ่งทีเดียวนะครับเอาละครับเดี๋ยวลำดับต่อไปนะครับจะเป็นส่วนของ panel discussions นะครับซึ่งเราจะมีวิทยากรทั้ง5ท่านเลยนะครับอันนี้รวมถึงคุณ Abel Lim นะครับขึ้นมาบนเวทีเพื่อที่จะพูดคุยนะครับแลกเปลี่ยนกันในมุมมองต่างๆที่อาจจะเกินไปกว่าในส่วนของสิ่งที่เป็น presentation ของแต่ละคนด้วยนะครับ Well and now I would like to move forward for the panel discussion upon the theme turning themes into opportunity. Today, as we might have heard from the 5 speakers, all of them will be on stage here in order to identify what are the opportunities that we are able to capture. And first of all, I would like to invite upon the stage once more, he is the head of Deposit and Wealth Management UOB Thailand, Mr. Abel Lim. ขอเสียงปรบมือให้คุณ Abel ด้วยนะครับ And please join me also in welcoming the Vice President of Global Market Strategist JPMorgan Asset Management, Riza Rozi. ขอเสียงปรบมือให้เธอด้วยนะครับท่านต่อมานะครับ and I would like to invite upon the stage the Associate Investment Director of Fidelity International, Liu Mingyue. ขอเสียงปรบมือให้เธอนะครับ And Senior Director, the Head of Multi-Asset Strategy, UOB Asset Management from Singapore, Mr. Anthony Joseph Raza. And last but not least, he's the Managing Director of Head of Fixed Income Portfolio Management in Asia, UBS Asset Management, Mr. Raymond Gee. Good afternoon, everyone. And from the next 45 minutes, we'll be hearing from our speakers. Of course, we have heard about the overview of the markets already and where the opportunities would lie within this context. But first of all, can I ask Kun Abel, first of all, do you think that 2026 is a positive year, that we are able to capture the new opportunities amidst of uncertainty?
I think we have established, based on the astute speakers today, that indeed 26 is going to be a reasonably good year for investors to contemplate buying into risk assets. I think a lot of the supportive tailwinds continue to exist, and a lot of potential fiscal and monetary policies around the world is also going to propel some of these gains towards for 26 as well.
นะครับแกก็เชื่ออย่างนี้นะครับว่าในปีนี้เองนะครับอย่างที่หลายๆคนได้พูดมาแกก็ยังย้ำข้อสรุปนะครับว่าปีนี้จะท้าทายยังมีโอกาสในการที่จะให้เดินหน้าต่อไปนะครับ Well, คุณ Raymond, this year it is seen by many analysts that the Federal Reserve might cut the interest rate for another 2 times, 25 basis points each. Do you think that bonds remain an attractive assets to invest in?
Yes, so for global fixed income, right, they have performed very strongly over the past 2 years. And this year, we continue to see will be a very positive year for fixed income. This is because, for this year, the most important factor for fixed income will be Fed policy. Because in the US, we do see inflation is getting controlled at high 2%, right? Even if we have the higher tariff last year. On the other hand, the US labor market has also showed certain weakness since second half of last year. So it will give the Fed more comfortability to cut rates further for the rest of this year. So that's why for fixed income, we do see for this year in terms of return driver, the major driver will be the carry or what's reflected in the bond yield, right? So I think depending on investors, they like investment grade or high yield, they like developed markets or emerging markets. The carry or the yield level currently is still about 5 to 8% in US dollar. So that's already a very strong base or cushion for fixed income to outperform. But in addition to that, if the Fed cut 2 times as we expected, right? So that will give additional potential capital appreciation to bonds, which will continue to make fixed income a quite good investment for this year. Thank you.
Well, of course, with the space of next, for example, if we have time, 5 to 7 years further, how should we approach investing in fixed income? Because there are many fixed incomes in the market. What should be the thinking principle for the investors here?
Yeah, so as I highlighted before, right? So every year, the outperformers could be different, right? So this year could be emerging markets again, but next year it could be Asian high yield or US investment grade. So it's very important investors to have a diversified portfolio, right? We can't bet right every year, but it's very important for your fixed income allocation, you are globally diversified. And every year you can do some reallocation based on the positive or negative view on different asset classes, right? For example, if we are still in a very strong credit upcycle, like currently and last year, right? Asian emerging market bonds will continue to outperform, right? But say later on, if there is any risk of US recession or global recession, we'd better to become a bit more defensive and maybe allocate more to money market instruments. And also I want to add another point is for this year, as I mentioned, our base case, it will continue to be a very good year for fixed income because you have 5 to 8% yield, right? And the potential capital appreciation from Fed cuts. But there is also risk here because for the new Fed chairman, right? So he already showed certain intention to shrink the Fed balance sheet. Of course, that's not easy to do. We need to closely observe. But if the Fed plans to shrink the balance sheet later, it may increase the rates volatility in fixed income space. So that's why running a diversified portfolio is always very important for fixed income. Thank you.
On a portfolio standpoint, I think fixed income always plays a very important part as a portfolio diversifier. We have established that valuations in the markets, it's high in certain areas. There could be potential risk and even bubbles within the global perspective. As such, it always makes sense for us to consider adding fixed income as that portfolio buffer, as a portfolio diversifier. In UOB, we like global developed market investment grade bonds and also Asia investment grades. I think while spreads are rather tight right now, they still offer very attractive yields and coupons. If I remember correctly, Asia investment grade is offering about nearly 5.4 and maybe developed markets of 4.8. So these are very attractive start points. So even though if you do not see attractive huge price movements, you still will continue to clip very attractive coupons.
Let me translate first แกบอกได้แบบนี้นะครับบอกว่า เรื่องของตัว Fixed Income เองถ้าเราดูนะครับณเวลานี้การประเมินนะครับตัวผลตอบแทนน่าจะอยู่ที่ประมาณ 5-8% ซึ่งถือได้ว่าดีมากนะครับอันนี้คือผนวกเข้าไปแล้วว่าถ้าเฟดมีการปรับลดอัตราดอกเบี้ย2 ครั้งแต่ไม่ว่าจะอย่างไรนะครับเศรษฐกิจสหรัฐเนี่ยถือว่ายังเติบโตที่ดีอยู่นะครับไม่มีสัญญาณของการที่เศรษฐกิจนั้นจะตกต่ำนอกเหนือไปจากนี้สำหรับคนไทยเองตอนนี้เงินบาทเราแข็งค่าครับการที่เราเดินหน้าเข้าไปและใช้เงินบาทในการไปซื้อเองก็น่าจะเป็นอีกหนึ่งส่วนที่จะเป็นตัว plus เข้ามาด้วยส่วนคุณแอเบลก็เสริมบอกว่าจริงๆแล้วในตัว Fixed Income เป็นเหมือนกับตัว diversifier คือเรามีหลายอย่างอยู่ในพอร์ตเราควรจะมี nature ของตัว asset ที่ไม่เหมือนกันที่อยู่ใน portfolio ด้วยเป็นการกระจายความเสี่ยงออกไปโดยเฉพาะยิ่งถ้าเกิดเราเทียบกันกับตัว yield นะครับซึ่งมีโอกาส 5-8% ถือว่าน่าสนใจเป็นอย่างยิ่งนะครับ Well another question for Raymond since you have mentioned that China seems to be quite promising yeah what kind of upside can we expect from investing in China fixed income
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm originally from mainland China, and we all know that over the past 5 years, right, the major challenge for China was the housing market. Because of the slowing down of the housing market, right, so for consumers, they also choose to save more and consume less, right? So the impact on the whole economy, we all see that. But the reality is, since 2024, the Chinese government continued to announce incremental stimulus to stabilize the market, to help the economy and also housing market. So we do see the whole situation actually are gradually stabilizing from here. For example, if you visit first-tier, second-tier cities in China today, you can see the supply and the demand balance in houses over those cities actually are getting much better today. For example, in tier 1 cities like Beijing, Shanghai, the sales inventory level already reduced to below 15 months, which is a much healthy level than before. And also the affordability of house in China actually now is also much better than 5 years before, right? Because price already dropped, but at the same time, over the past 5 years, house income continued to grow. So the price-income ratio also improved a lot. That's why the whole situation actually are gradually stabilizing from here. And on the other hand, over the past 2-3 years, we also see the very quick growth of the new economy, right? Which including AI-related technology, including electronic vehicle. So they actually are making up the GDP growth for the negative impact from the housing market. So that's why over the past 3 years, China still achieved a very stable 5% GDP growth. Right? So that's why I do see moving forward, there is good reasons to be more positive on China. And the investment opportunity on fixed income side, we have turned positive on Chinese credits, especially high yield credits since 2 years before. Because in late 2023, we did see, because of the bearish sentiment of the overall market, for Chinese credits, they were traded at a very distressed level. We look at a lot of Chinese companies. We didn't see default risk at all, but they were traded at 70 cents, 60 cents, or even 50 cents. So over the past 2 years, they have recovered and performed very well. So that's why even today, we continue to see a lot of investment opportunities in Chinese high-yield credits, including the distressed developer new world development in Hong Kong. Year to date, the bond already rallied over 30% in terms of total return because it was traded too distressed last year.
แกบอกแบบนี้ครับบอกว่าถ้าไปดูผมถามว่าแกพูดเรื่องดีเกี่ยวกับจีนมาเยอะนะครับถามเหตุผลเพิ่มเติมว่าเติบโตได้ขนาดไหนแกบอกข้อแรกเลยถอยกลับไปปี 2024 นะครับรัฐบาลจีนอัดฉีดสภาพคล่องเข้าไปในจีนเยอะมากนะครับนอกเหนือไปจากนี้ปัญหาที่เกิดขึ้นเกี่ยวกับสังหาริมทรัพย์ถูกแก้ไขไประดับหนึ่งแล้ว ถามว่ายังไงหนึ่งเลยครับไปดูสต็อกนะครับในเมืองที่เป็นเมืองเทียวันนะครับเป่ยจิงซั่งไห่หนานจิงพวกนี้ซึ่งเขาบอกว่ามันปรับตัวลดลงมาต่ำที่สุดลงมาเรื่อยๆนะครับนอกเหนือไปจากนี้ในพื้นที่ที่ไม่ใช่เทียวันครับเทีย2เทีย3เทีย4ก็ถือว่าเติบโตขึ้นเรื่อยๆตัวระบบนิเวศเองนะครับเช่น autonomous driving โครงสร้างพื้นฐานก็เติบโตขึ้นนอกเหนือไปจากนี้นะครับถ้าเกิดว่าเรามองสมัยที่เกิดปัญหาเรื่องเครดิตนะครับแล้วก็ปัญหาเรื่องอสังหาริมทรัพย์ของจีนเนี่ยจะพบว่าทำให้จีนเองก็เลยมีตัวยิวที่สูงขึ้นเพื่อเป็นการดึงดูดให้คนมาซื้อนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นมีความหมายว่าตัวยิวสูงขึ้นนะครับแต่ขณะเดียวกันความมั่นคงที่อยู่เบื้องหลังสูงขึ้นเลยมองว่าน่าจะมีโอกาสนะครับ Well, then I would like to turn the question to Anthony here. Last year, 2025 seems to be a very good year for many people. And the point is that we don't know whether 2026 will repeat to be the same, or how can we capture further upside while at the same time managing downside risk.
Okay, I already expressed a lot of the reasons for just broad market enthusiasm for 2026. I think I would highlight a couple more just ideas. So firstly, when it comes to the AI investments, we really like what we continue to see. We even keep looking at the valuations, and the earnings growth is so strong that these companies are keeping pace with their valuations, and we're not overly alarmed. So that's one theme that I think has been mentioned before. We continue like that. The other thing that we emphasize is an important trend is we call it the yield curve is steepening. And this means that short-term rates are lower than long-term rates. And this tends to happen when investors, especially fixed income investors, have a positive view about like the 10-year outlook. It's an indication of sort of more longer-term confidence in the economy. It's a complicated issue. Maybe there's some concerns about debt levels and so forth. But for the most part, there's a long history that when this is happening, when the yield curve is steepening, this is a time when banks do well because their businesses run around the slope of the yield curve and they have direct benefits. It also speaks to you get a broadening in the economy and the broadening of the stocks that perform. So while we're positive on the II stocks, actually we would almost overweight the rest of the market this year. That given these trends, we actually think we can get the rest of the market to maybe even outperform these AI stocks this year. And then the other element is this is usually sort of positive on cyclical stocks. So this would be industrial cyclicals and consumer cyclicals. So that's, I guess, a key theme. The last thing I would mention then is commodities would also tend to do well at this point in the cycle. So right now, it's like any metal with an elemental element number behind it is doing very well. It's pretty much everything. Obviously, gold has been a key theme. And you know, we've been highlighting just structurally, just the demand from central banks, the demand from consumers, the desire to have a safe asset besides government bonds is so strong that if everybody wants to put, 2% of this in their portfolio, the clearing price is still much higher than it is even today. So I guess those would just be a couple additional themes on part of the broad positivity.
นะครับแกบอกแบบนี้ถ้าเกิดเราไปดูตัว yield curve นะครับจะพบว่าผลตอบแทนพันธบัตรตอนนี้มันชันขึ้นถ้าเกิดว่าเราตีความกันแบบง่ายๆคือสถานการณ์เศรษฐกิจเนี่ยดูแล้วนิ่งขึ้นนะครับคนที่ปล่อยเครดิตกู้ออกไปเนี่ยก็ดูแล้วสบายใจมากขึ้นอีกส่วนหนึ่งก็คือตัวอุตสาหกรรมที่เป็นอุตสาหกรรมวัฏจักรหรือว่า cyclical นะครับตอนนี้กลับมาดูโดดเด่นอีกครั้งหนึ่งก็แสดงว่าตัวเศรษฐกิจนั้นยังมีความแข็งแกร่งอยู่ด้วยตัวราคาของ commodity โภคภัณฑ์ก็มีการปรับตัวขึ้นสิ่งเหล่านี้เองครับคือสิ่งที่จะบอกว่าตัวพื้นฐานนะครับหลายๆข้อมูลเองเนี่ยบอกเราว่าปีนี้เศรษฐกิจจะมีความนิ่งและน่าลงทุนด้วยนะครับ Well, Kun Reza, since you mentioned several factors, I like your dichotomy by the way, policy and politics. U.S. is of course one of the leading in the world market, but which of these drivers or factors, earnings, rates, valuations, and policy matter most for U.S. markets?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think if you look back in 2025 and look at US, for example, and all the other key markets, right, we did see some re-rating happening, and that's kind of contributed to the equity returns of last year in 2025. But like everyone here, we're all long-term investors, right? So taking a step back and looking from the last 10 years point of view, and you look what are the key drivers, not only in the US, but in Japan, in Europe, etc., it's actually earnings more than multiple expansions. So earnings will be the key driver. And when you decompose earnings, in the case of the US, it is profit margins that's really being the most important factor when it comes to earnings growth, right? And so we can, slice and dice it any way we want, but in the case of the US, profit margins have been very strong. It has been very resilient. Obviously, it's been driven very much so by the tech piece as well. So the S&P 500 tech, the rest of the universe, not so much. But I think even going forward, because we do have a lot of conviction in this artificial intelligence theme, we've seen a lot of hyperscalers spending a lot. The balance sheets for all these hyperscalers now are a lot cleaner than what we saw of a similar subset of these companies back in the dot-com bubble. So I think that's also very important to note, because we do get many questions at dot-com bubble. No, it's not like a bubble. If anything, this is more tangible. The fact that we're building out and scaling up so much is because there is tangible demand. And this is what marks AI era different from what we saw back during 2002.
ผมถามกันนะครับบอกว่าในบรรดาปัจจัยต่างๆนะครับของหุ้น US หลายคนก็จะบอกว่ามีหลายแฟกเตอร์นะครับเช่นบอกว่าผลตอบแทนหรือว่าผลกำไรของบริษัทหรือเปล่าหรือว่ามันเป็นที่อัตราดอกเบี้ยนะครับที่จะมีการตัดสินหรือว่ามันเป็นตัวราคาของหลักทรัพย์ที่จะเข้าไปหรือมันเป็นที่ตัวนโยบายแกบอกว่าสำคัญที่สุดเลยนะครับเวลาเราไปดูว่าอันไหนฟองสบู่ไม่ฟองสบู่อันไหนแข็งแกร่งจริงไม่แข็งแกร่งจริงให้ไปดูที่ earnings ก็คือตัวผลประกอบการครับที่ผ่านมาผลประกอบการนะครับเช่นของ hyperscaler เนี่ยเห็นชัดเจนครับว่าหุ้นมันเติบโตแต่ว่ารายได้เงินของเขาที่ได้มันได้จริงซึ่งตรงนี้ถ้าไปเทียบกันนะครับกับฟองสบู่ .com เมื่อประมาณ24 ปีที่แล้วเนี่ยจะพบว่าตอนนั้นอย่างที่บอกครับมีไม่ใช่หุ้นทุกตัวนะครับที่ตัวขึ้นหุ้นขึ้นไปแล้วและมี earnings แต่ earnings ครับคือจะเป็นตัวชี้ขาดว่าตัวนี้เนี่ยน่าลงทุนมากน้อยขนาดไหนและมันจะเป็นตัวหลักเลยครับในการที่จะ drive US market ต่อไปด้วยWell, Kun Anthony, I've got another question. Due to the fact that we have been talking about opportunity in Asia, mainly, in Asia, probably China or Asia Japan, do you think in terms of upside, what will be the key catalysts for the Asian equity that could drive the performance further? How can we capture that opportunity? Kun Anthony.
Yes, sorry, that for me. So I would add a couple of things. I mentioned the broad ones. I think the weaker U.S. dollar trend is good, and China's stability is good. But I'd highlight a couple more things. So firstly, I think I showed earnings growth of the various regions, and just a quick highlight is the region that has the highest earnings growth in the world is Asia, and I think that's going to be a key driver of markets around the world. Secondly, it's a little bit tied to the U.S. dollar trend, but what you get is this virtual cycle when you get in these periods for Asia. So when the U.S. dollar is not overly strong and Asian currencies are quite robust and strong, what happens is interest rates in Asia then can come down because the interest rates don't have to stay high to protect the currency. And then lower interest rates support the economy, which then supports the currency even more. And you get this virtual cycle that you can keep interest rates lower and keep perpetuating this growth. And so I see Asia sort of entering this virtuous cycle, and it hasn't happened in a long time. It's been over a decade since Asia's had one of these positive virtuous cycles. And therefore valuations are still reasonable, and there's lots of opportunities in what the companies are doing. So anyway, that's a few more points on some of the things that we're optimistic about what we're seeing in Asia.
Abel, seems that you want to add something.
Okay, so to add on to some of the points that Anthony and has articulated, I think it's also quite important, it's not very much discussed today, is China broadening or China going global. Today, in fact, 11.3, maybe 11.5% of CSI 300 draws its income outside China. It does suggest that it is now starting to at least try to detach its dependency on a wholly domestic consumption-based economy and trying to draw some of its revenues outside China. And this is important because we all know that the Chinese economy is still slow. They are still grappling with the property sector. To be able to draw external income, that is going to help the Chinese cause a lot. Increasingly, we see a lot more Chinese names and brands outside China. In fact, a lot of us are quite familiar with some of these brands. In fact, if you think about it, out of the Fortune 500 companies, 130 of these companies are Chinese now. So they've come a very, very long way, and this will continue to evolve itself.
นะครับผมถามเรื่องของโอกาสนะครับของหุ้นนะครับที่เป็นของเอเชียคุณแอนโทนีบอกแบบนี้บอกว่าข้อหนึ่งเลยนะครับคือเรื่องของอัตราดอกเบี้ยนะครับของในภูมิภาคเราเนี่ยมันไม่ค่อยสูงครับราคาเงินเราเนี่ยอยู่ในจุดที่ค่อนข้างจะเหมาะสมนะครับแต่ทีนี้ทางด้านของคุณเอเบอร์ลิมได้บอกงี้แกบอกว่าเวลาที่เรามองหุ้นจีนอ่ะอย่าไปมองแค่จีนนะครับเราไปดู MSCI China ดัชนีนะครับ 11% ของบริษัทพวกนั้นเขาไปหาเงินต่างประเทศครับเพราะนั้นมีความหมายว่าเขาไม่ได้มีความ dependent หรือไม่ได้มีความผูกพันหรือว่าไม่ได้พึ่งอยู่แค่ตลาดภายในประเทศบางคนพอเวลาไปมองหุ้นจีนก็จะมองว่าตลาดจีนโตไม่หวือหวาเหมือนเดิมนะครับ 2-3 ปีที่ผ่านมาโต 5% ถ้าเทียบกับอดีตซึ่งเคยเป็น double digit เคยเป็น 8% ตอนนี้เหลือแค่ 5 แต่ก็บอกไม่ใช่แล้วบอกว่าจีนเองเนี่ยเดินหน้ามาไกลพอสมควรนอกเหนือไปจากนี้ยังมีหุ้นใหญ่นะครับที่ประดมทุนที่สหรัฐก็เป็นของจีนเช่นเดียวกันเพราะฉะนั้นอยากให้มองนะครับหุ้นเอเชียในรูปแบบที่มีความเปลี่ยนแปลงไปด้วยนะครับ Well, Mingyue, since you have talked quite extensively about the prospect of the AI, can you list some of the short-term and medium-term catalysts that would drive AI-related equity? And of course, once we talk about opportunity, how about risk?
Sure. So talking about the near-term or mid-term catalyst, I think the first one will be, of course, lower cost for all the AI usage. It will encourage us to use AI more and also encourage companies to use AI more. Bring us back to 1 year ago when DeepSeek just come into the market, the price per token using for DeepSeek is much, much lower compared to the US hyperscalers. And these actually, as a disruptor, come into the market and encourage other peers in the market to think about their model, to think about their spending. So the first catalyst will be a much lower cost for the company-wise and also for the end user. And the second one I would think about is also linked with the lower cost. It is the monetization and the commercialization for the company. So with the first batch of AI adopters started to generate money, started to see it from their balance sheet, started to see it from their revenue and earnings, more companies will be more encouraged to do this adoption. So for example, the software companies, for now they are providing these services for free and we are very happy to use them for free. But what if in the future it's so powerful and increase so much of this productivity, and for the software company, they can generate more money from this. And also think about some healthcare companies. There are healthcare research companies, biotech companies using AI to do this research. So instead of going through 100 lab tests, they now only need to do a few tests with a high probability ratio suggested by the AI tool. This is going to generate revenue and to save cost for them and to bring earnings for them. So the lower cost and also the monetization trend in the near term will encourage the development in the future. And in the longer term, I would say the catalyst will be more related to our daily life, the physical adoption. Like what we show in the chart, like the L3 driving. You can only imagine it today, but what if you really have it in your daily life? You can drive a car, hands-free, mind-free, eyes-free, and it will shows you how powerful this AI tool is in your daily life. And you will be wondering, what can I do with it for other stuff, for other tasks in my life? So the physical adoption and also link our daily life to bring the real productivity change is the longer term catalyst. And maybe for the risk. On the risk side, the first one is concentration. So as we're seeing in the hyperscalers, there are a lot of mini cycles. There are a lot of layers in the AI development. So concentrate too much in a single area or on a small group of companies, this is risk for investors. And also for the company to put so much investment on a single technology is also a risk. And the second risk will be, the second risk will be from the policy side. We need the policymaker to support us. This is actually we see some positive policies like supportive for innovation and support AI development in the region and also globally. But policy risk and also linked as a geopolitical risk is a risk we need to be mindful in the future investment of AI. So this will be the opportunities and also risks.
I haven't yet finished my question to you, but let me translate a little bit further. ถามบอกว่าเอาระยะใกล้ๆก่อนว่าเรื่องของตัว AI นะครับอะไรคือตัว catalyst แกบอกว่ามีอยู่2-3ข้อแรกก่อนนะครับต้นทุนมันต่ำลงเรื่อยๆครับต้นทุนต่ำไม่ว่าสมัยก่อนทำออกแล้วยังไม่รู้ว่าจะเอาไปทำเงินอย่างไรปัจจุบันต้นทุนต่ำแล้วแต่ยัง monetize คือการเอาแนวความคิดออกไปหาเงินได้จริงๆนะครับนอกเหนือไปจากนี้ประการที่2ก็คือว่าในปัจจุบัน AI มันใกล้ตัวเรามากขึ้นแล้วครับยกตัวอย่างเช่น autonomous driving คือรถขับขี่แบบปราศจากคนขับนะครับแต่ก่อนดูเหมือนไกลพอมันใกล้ขึ้นในอนาคตก็มีความหมายทุกคนจะต้องมีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องกับตัว AI อยู่แล้วนะครับอันนี้คือจุดที่เป็น catalyst หรือว่าตัวที่คอยกระตุ้นให้มันดูแล้วดูดีแต่ขณะเดียวกันครับถามว่าความเสี่ยงคืออะไรเวลาเราเห็นบริษัทใหญ่ๆครับทำปัญญาประดิษฐ์เนี่ยจะเป็น hyperscaler ชื่อก็บอกโตมใหญ่มากนะฮะแต่ว่าข้างหลังมันนะครับจะมีบริษัทเล็กๆยิบๆนะครับแต่ละบริษัทก็จะทำคนละอย่างพอทำคนละอย่างครับมีความหมายว่าความเสี่ยงสูงครับเหมือนนั่งเก้าอี้ขาเดียวครับพูดง่ายอันไหนเวิร์กก็เวิร์กต้นทุนก็สูงเพราะฉะนั้นอาจจะเป็นอีกหนึ่งความเสี่ยงถัดมาครับด้วยความที่เป็นสิ่งใหม่ครับมันก็จะมีส่วนที่เป็นนโยบายนะครับหรือว่ากรอบกฎหมายของภาครัฐในการที่จะบางที่ก็อาจจะกำกับบางที่ก็อาจจะบอกว่าปล่อยเพราะฉะนั้นตรงนี้อาจจะกลายมาเป็นความเสี่ยงเพิ่มเติมได้อีกนะครับ Well I can't sleep without asking you these questions tech war yeah? Because since you mentioned that on the one hand we have the US AI hyperscaler and on the other side you have Chinese one which one is in a better position and second one if we have to allocate our amount in order to, sorry to say, but to bet upon US side AI or Chinese AI, what would be your recommendation?
Okay, I want to start to answer this question with a very funny saying we have in China. Only kids do the either-or choice. Adults will take all. So it's not an either-or choice here between US or China or between the hyperscalers and the AI adopters. You can have both, you can have all of them. Because as we mentioned, there will be a lot of mini cycles, there will be a lot of layers in the AI development. And we are only at the very beginning of it right now. So with the future development, we know what the US is good at. US has a hyperscaler and they have the tool and they have the technology semiconductors. And also they have this, the testing, some of the testing, US may not be leading, Europe is leading the testing as well as Japan. And China is good at this daily adoption for now, as what we have already seen in the 5G era with Alibaba and Tencent, these companies emerging as a world leader. China is good for this for now. But there may be collaborations and there will be competition in the future. So don't put your bet on a single market or on a single theme. It will be a broader theme. It will be cross-industry. So that's why we need to diversify our stock pickings and also our portfolio pickings. So the opportunities will be very diversified, so as your portfolio.
สำคัญนะครับก็คือการกระจายการลงทุนครับ diversify นะครับเพราะว่าท้ายที่สุดแล้วมันจะเชื่อมโยงกันไปกันมานะครับไม่จะเป็นขนาดใหญ่สู่ขนาดเล็กนอกเหนือไปจากนี้มันไม่ได้อยู่ในโลกของตัวมันเองนะครับมันจะมีความไปเชื่อมโยงกับอุตสาหกรรมอื่นๆอย่างที่เธอใช้ across industries มีความหมายว่าทุกคนจะใช้แต่ต้องไม่ลืมอย่างครับตอนนี้มันเป็นแค่ช่วงเริ่มต้นตั้งไข่นะครับของอุตสาหกรรมปัญญาประดิษฐ์ในอนาคตเราจะเห็นสิ่งต่างๆซึ่งเราไม่เคยจินตนาการมาก่อนเลยดังนั้นครับเมื่อเราไม่เห็นเรา diversify ครับนั่นคือสิ่งที่ดีที่สุดเลยนะครับ Well next question is for คุณ Razor Due to the fact that so far we have focused upon technology, tech stocks, big tech and so on should we still be in there or should we rotate and think about other alternative let's say in healthcare sector or some other What would be your input?
Yeah, I think just to answer your question and kind of reframing it, is there market concentration risk? I think it's very evident that there is, given the amount of conversations that we've had around artificial intelligence so far. But when it comes to AI, I think it's very important to also zoom out and think that AI is not hyperscalers, it's an ecosystem. So you have your architects, and that's where your hyperscalers sit. You have your enablers, that's your infrastructure, your power companies. And then finally, you have your adopters, so your softwares and everything. So right now, the worry about monetization has always been about the hyperscalers, right? That's where it's being very focused on. But if you think where the monetization has been very clear so far, it's actually in the enablers, the power companies, etc. Because if you think about it, if you go to ChatGPT and you enter something, that obviously requires a lot of energy, right? Electricity, etc. So this is why there is that major push to build out all these data centers, etc. Again, there is a tangible demand for these data centers, etc. Because if you look at vacancy rates of data centers, it's at record lows. So again, I think even within the AI bucket, you've got to be very careful because they're not all made equal and they all would not be benefiting equally as well. Now, within the hyperscalers, if you're very invested in the hyperscalers, the Max 7, now they're also not made the same, right? Because you got to look and see which companies are actually spending, raising debt, or are they using their free cash flow. Again, they're not made equal, so it's very important to diversify out. But again, I think going back to your point, should we look outside of this whole tech ecosystem? The straight answer is yes, because as long-term investors, we are looking for other structural trends, right? You talk about healthcare, AI cuts through healthcare too. Soon enough, we're not going to have a radiologist that interprets our x-rays, right? It's going to be the AI. And so basically, even within the medical space, you got to be very careful as to where you allocate to as well, because obviously you have pharmaceutical terrors, potentially from Trump. So you do want to look for where the winners are as well. Think about financials. Obviously, we've spoken about Trump policies, and we've always kind of painted it in a slightly negative way, but also deregulation would benefit some of the financials as well, as banks can, now they don't really have to keep so much in their reserves, they could lend out, etc., and that spurs economic activity. So I think the bottom line is that even within the US equity space, there are plenty of opportunities outside of hyperscalers within the tech universe, but also outside of the whole tech space. But also, I think it's important to know, and I think we've spoken a little bit, or actually quite a fair bit on Asia, I think it's also very important to rebalance that portfolio. So rebalancing your portfolio, if you're overly concentrated in, say, tech or US equities, while at least our view at JPMorgan is that US equities remain a core allocation, what we're trying to say is that you might want to look closer to home in Asia. Because if you think about Asia, the fact that we had that software sell-off last week, the fact that Asia didn't sell off that much is also because of a high exposure to hardware, right? Because we're very critical. You think about the high-end semiconductor chips, South Korea, Taiwan, they have the leadership, right, in that. So looking closer to home, if you want income in a very volatile year, which this year will be, it's only been 6 weeks so far this year, it's been so volatile. We have another 8 months or 10 months to go. That's like less than 10 months. So in that sort of environment, you want income, right? So you want high dividend stocks. China is a good place to look at, right? Corporate governance reforms. You have Japan doing it. You have South Korea doing it. Singapore is trying to reinvigorate their equity landscape as well. So plenty of opportunities within the US, but also outside US.
Thank you for your wisdom. It's more than knowledge, it's wisdom. นะครับแกบอกแบบนี้ถอยกลับมาอย่าไปดูว่ามันคืออุตสาหกรรมแยกนะครับแต่ว่ามันจะถูกนำไปใช้ในทุกๆอุตสาหกรรมเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยถ้าเราเปลี่ยนรูปแบบการมองเช่นแกยกตัวอย่างบอกว่า Hyperscaler ก็ทำเรื่อง AI ไปแต่ในขณะเดียวกันพวกเขาใช้พลังและกำลังมหาศาลแน่นอนต้องใช้กำลังไฟฟ้านะครับเยอะแยะมากมายเรื่องของพลังงานก็ได้ enjoy ไปด้วยนอกเหนือไปจากนี้สมมตินำมาใช้กับวงการ finance ก็สามารถทำได้เช่นเดียวกันนำไปใช้อุตสาหกรรมไหนก็สามารถใช้ได้นอกเหนือไปจากนี้นะครับฮาร์ดแวร์ต่างๆที่ใช้ชิปเซมิคอนดักเตอร์ก็กระจายไปเช่นโรงงานอาจจะอยู่ที่ไต้หวันก็ได้หรือว่าอาจจะไปอยู่ที่อื่นซัพพลายเชนมันยาวนะครับผลข้างเคียงถามว่าเฮลท์แคร์ใช่ไหมทุกอุตสาหกรรมจะใช้เพราะว่ามันไม่ใช่แค่อุตสาหกรรมมันเป็นอีโคซิสเต็มนะครับก็เลยบอกว่าอยากจะให้มองเปรียบเทียบกันว่ามันไม่ใช่อุตสาหกรรมที่เป็นคู่แข่งกันและกันแต่เขาคือพื้นฐานของโลกใบใหม่ที่จะเกี่ยวข้องกันกับทุกๆอุตสาหกรรมด้วยนะครับ Well without talking about another subject we cannot leave this room gold we have been talking about many things already but last year one of the best performer is gold how do we think about investing in gold as the asset that hedge and how can we capture that opportunity amidst of uncertainty in the world? คุณ Abel
Fun fact, if you smelted every single mine gold in the world right now, you can only fill about 3.5, maybe 4 Olympic-sized swimming pool. So there's not very much yellow matter out there, and hence the value. Since 24, I think we saw gold prices starting to trend up in a very spectacular manner. In fact, in 25 alone, gold broke 50 all-time highs. So that's a significant number for asset class to break. Now, what is gold typically performs well in environments, a macro environment or macro landscape when real yields are low, when there's volatility, uncertainty, geopolitical issues and questions. So typically gold tends to become the investment of choice. Now, if you think about it, today, in today's landscape, low yield, market volatility, geopolitics, this has become very common. In fact, it has become like an expected market event. Hence, the role of gold no longer becomes a hedge against the risk, but it kind of becomes a bit of a necessity in anybody's portfolio to include in their overall allocation. So gold has increasingly become very important for most investors. Now, gold also corrected in a very big way recently. After running up 30% since the beginning of this year, gold corrected. Okay? And one can point to the allocation towards gold in 25. I think the two key contributors to gold's purchasing last year were the central banks. In fact, China bought gold 14 months straight to shore up their gold, to shore up their supply and to back their currency. But increasingly, or interestingly enough, we saw a huge participation from the retail space through ETFs. So we saw a lot of this speculative FOMO, fear of losing out trades coming into this gold trades. And unfortunately, retail investors does introduce volatility, because when prices has gone up a little bit too quickly, they tend to want to take money off the table. And hence, that is one of the reasons why we saw gold rising up so quickly and at the same time correcting quite meaningfully as well. So broadly speaking, we still maintain a very positive view on gold. UOB's view is that gold will track towards 5,400 towards the end of this year. So there's still a little bit more upside in terms of gold as we speak. And of course, market forces, increased volatility, could it be it tariff related, be it trade related, be it policy missteps, gold will continue to be a matter of choice.
แกบอกว่าเอาข้อสรุปนะครับทองคำคือสินทรัพย์ที่หลายคนคงจะต้องมีไว้ในพอร์ตครับสาเหตุเพราะโลกนี้จะเต็มไปด้วยความไม่แน่นอนนะครับและที่ผ่านมานะครับทองก็แรลลี่ขึ้นมาตะบี้ตะบันปีที่แล้วนะครับปีนี้ก็เติบโตมาประมาณ10 กว่า%จากนั้นถอยกลับมาปรับฐานคือ correct ตัวมันเองบ้างนะครับส่วนหนึ่งเลยแรงผลักดันก็มาจากการที่ธนาคารกลางทั่วโลกเลยเพราะธนาคารกลางจีนน่ะซื้อทองตุนเอาไว้เนี่ยนะครับเป็นหลัก10 กว่าเดือนติดต่อกันเลยนะครับนอกจากนี้เนี่ยบางทีก็เกิดกระแส FOMO นะครับ fear of missing out แล้วก็ไปซื้อทองคำนะครับอยู่ในรูปของ ETF นะครับยังไงก็ตามท่ามกลางโลกที่มีความท้าทายเนี่ยหลายคนก็เลยบอกจำเป็นต้องมีทองคำอยู่ในพอร์ตเอาไว้บ้างนะครับ Well I wish we have got another 3 hours to discuss this. Unfortunately, the time is over. Anyway, ขอเสียงปรบมือให้กับทั้ง 5 ท่านบนเวทีด้วยนะครับ Well, thank you very much for your contributions and your thinking principle. Thank you very much. และนี่ก็คือทั้งหมดนะครับของงานในวันนี้นะครับ Privilege Conversations นะครับ 2026 Start of the Year Investment Outlook นะครับสำหรับวันนี้ในวันนี้ต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านนะครับที่มาร่วมงานด้วยยังไงก็ตามผมอยากจะรบกวนนะครับให้ทุกท่านเนี่ยตอบแบบสอบถามด้วยการสแกน QR Code ที่อยู่ที่โต๊ะของท่านนะครับคอมเมนต์ของท่านมีความสำคัญต่อการจัดงานครั้งต่อๆไปของเราด้วยนะครับยังไงก็ตามต้องขอกราบขอบพระคุณทุกท่านเลยนะครับที่มาร่วมงานในวันนี้ท่านตอบแบบสอบถามแล้วสามารถไปที่โต๊ะลงทะเบียนได้นะครับเพื่อที่จะรับของที่ระลึกจากทาง UOB ด้วยแล้ววันนี้ต้องขอบพระคุณทุกท่านหวังเป็นอย่างยิ่งว่าเนื้อหาวันนี้ Privilege Conversation จะช่วยให้ท่านนั้นสามารถวางแผนกลยุทธ์การลงทุนนะครับท่ามกลางความแตกต่างและความไม่แน่นอนของโลกใบนี้ในปี 2569 ด้วยวันนี้นะครับในนามของ UOB ขอบพระคุณทุกท่านและพบกันใหม่โอกาสหน้าสวัสดีครับ Well, thank you very much.